chemistry, biology, and genomics. He has worked as a scientist at MIT and is presently a founding member of the Head of Research and Development for Expansion Technologies, which is a bio startup that's developing early-stage diagnostic methods for various cancers. As the pandemic hit, his research team started developing monoclonal antibody therapeutics to fight COVID-19 infections. Dr. DeWall has presented at many international webinars, participated in several panel discussions, and news and debates is sharing facts on COVID from constantly when the virus took over. Dr. DeWall was recognized by the Ministry of Youth Empowerment and Sports of the Government of Connecticut and SAARC Nations International Human Rights Association as a global awareness COVID-19 warrior. It brings me great pleasure to introduce Dr. DeWall to give us our opening remarks for today's webinar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sabita, for a kind introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to each and everyone from various parts of the world. I'd like to thank Lead India Foundation for organizing this event, which is a need of the hour. And my association started with the Lead India Foundation since the COVID-19 pandemic hit the world. We have conducted many educational and informative webinars, panel discussions with experts from all over the world. And today's one of them. Today's session is also one of them. And these webinars and sessions helped many people that increased awareness on COVID-19 infections, up-to-date information on vaccines and therapeutic developments, clarifying myths, and so on. Also, during the devastating COVID-19 second wave in India, the Lead India Foundation USA have initiated and participated in many philanthropic activities on the ground level to help many people who is in need, such as 5 ambulances were deployed to 5 different charity organizations, and many hundreds of concentrators were also donated to the needy. I feel proud to be a part of the Lead India Foundation, and I encourage the youth to associate with it so that they can bring the change in the world, which is one of the dreams of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. Almost 2 years since the COVID-19 pandemic started. It started in December 2019. Now we are in December 2021. We are still fighting this virus. Is there any end to this pandemic? If yes, when? Is it in near future or far away? We're going to go get answers to all of these kind of questions in the panel discussion from our experts, eminent speakers that we have today. So what's happening? Let's see the history, these 2 years of history, what happened. Though viral infections started in China in December 2019, World Health Organization announced it as a pandemic in March 2020 because it took about 3 months to understand the virus, the severity of the virus. However, we have successfully developed a couple of vaccines and one therapeutic which is rendered by December 2020 within a month's period of time. Very rapid development to fight with this pandemic. As we started disseminating or distributing the vaccines around the world to get over with this pandemic, on the other hand, the virus started a survival fight against us in the form of variants. Since then, we were hit by many waves. Second wave, third wave, the series is ongoing. Some countries, some continents were hit by multiple waves. And some of the countries already started preparing for the upcoming waves. And these variants were categorized by World Health Organization as voice of concern, voice of interest, and voice under monitoring. What are these? We will know in a few minutes from our expert panel members. In fact, D614G variant was emerged even before we had the vaccines. Though, here I would like to mention a few variants that are in the voice of concern category. Alpha and beta variants emerged in December 2020, Gamma variant in January 2021, and the devastating Delta variant in May 2021. And now, Omicron, since last week. Meantime, few other Variants also evolved, like epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, which we do not know much. But it seems like, by the end of this pandemic, the world population will certainly be aware of the Greek alphabets. Even we don't know, we may have to move on to another alphabet, like maybe French or Spanish alphabet, or Sanskrit alphabet, something like that, to name these variants. Jokes apart, mostly we'll stick today's session to the concerns with Omicron variant and upcoming wave with surge in cases, hospitalizations, deaths. Additionally, we believe our discussion today would address some of the issues like myths, fears about COVID breakthrough infections, and how serious is going to be this Omicron variant. How concerned do we have to be? And misconceptions about the vaccines, vaccine hesitancy, and vaccine protestations, etc., etc. We also take questions from Zoom. Whoever is on the Zoom, please raise your hands, and then I'll let you unmute and ask the question. I'll announce your name, and I'll let you unmute and ask the question. And whoever is watching this on YouTube, please post your questions on the chat window, and we will try to address as many questions as today with our eminent speakers. Today we have an excellent panel of experts from various parts of the world. We have Dr. Manuel Ferri Garabal from Spain. We have Dr. Julie Jeste from USA, Dr. Hussein Wadwa and Dr. Salim Parker from South Africa, and we have Dr. MSS Mukherjee from India, and myself, Dr. Mahendra Duwal. India, I represent India as well as USA. On behalf of the Lead India Foundation, USA, I welcome all of you, sirs and madam. We really appreciate your time. Please accept our heartfelt gratitude for sharing your knowledge and experience with the world population through our platform. We believe that this session will shed some light on the facts, bring hope, and people may gain confidence with medicine and trust in science so that they may lead a peaceful life. The way we organize this session is, first, we will invite the speakers one by one to share their experiences and thoughts with the COVID-19 and its variants is a 5-minute summary. Then we will move on to the panel discussions with the question and answer session. Having said that, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll hand over to Sabita. Sabita, can you take over from now? Invite our first speaker, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahendra. Our next speaker is His Excellency Professor Sir Manuel Alejandro Freire Garabal Nunes. He is a full professor of pharmacology at the School of Medicine at the University of Santiago de Compostela. An esteemed author, board director, and advisor, he has the opportunity to create products and solutions to develop strategies that provide answers. Currently, he is also involved in the design and development of artificial intelligence that can be applied to healthcare and higher education. I welcome Dr. Manuel to share his expertise with our forum today. Dr. Manuel, you're up.
Thank you very much, Sabita. Well, I am very happy to participate as a guest speaker in this new edition of Dr. Abdul Kalam Global Webinars, organized by the India Foundation. I want to express my gratitude to Dr. Epanapali for his kind invitation. And I would like to send my best regards to all the other participants in this panel, and of course to all the people who are attending this event from different parts of the world. I send you my best wishes for health, happiness, and prosperity. The World Health Organization announced this fifth variant of concern of SARS-CoV-19 based on the epidemiological data indicating an increase in infections in South Africa in the recent weeks. As my previous panelist said, passed only 24 months since the first case of COVID-19 was reported, but it left about 260 million cases and the amount of 5.2 million deaths worldwide. It's a big amount, but it's not so big as the so-called Spanish flu left about 50 million worldwide, but supposedly it was higher because it coincided with the First World War. Many people dying in the war should be not due to the bombs, but due to the virus. But at this moment, people were quite happy on leaving the pandemic because vaccines were quite effective. And we were learning of what happened and giving new solutions for instance, education. I am the professor at the university, so we were learning of the opportunities that digital technologies gave to us. But this new wave makes us feel frustrated. Just when our aulas, our rooms were full up again of students, perhaps we can to think again on leaving the aulas and to continue giving classes through the Zoom or any other digital system to provide lectures. This is having a big impact on the stress resilience and mental health. One of my fields of research was for a long time social determinants of health, and I am really worried about that. But well, my other area of interest, my present one, is especially dedicated to discovering new drugs against infection and cancer also. So, which are the main concerns about the Omicron variant? Well, the first one is because the previous variants emerged in a world with a common natural immunity against COVID-19. But Omicron has emerged at the time when vaccine immunity is increasing all over the world. So what's happening? Do the vaccines do not work? That's the question everybody asks to me when they are not involved in medicine affairs. The second one, is this a faster spreading variant? Omicron obviously has a rapid rise in the number of cases that worries experts. As example, the 1st of December, South Africa recorded more than 8,500 cases, up from the 3,400 reported 5 days before, and several hundreds per day in mid-November. This means that Omicron has the potential to spread much faster and infect vastly more people than the latter variant, the Delta one. If this pattern is repeated in other countries, the variant could spark explosive increases in COVID-19 cases everywhere. What predicts an increased transmissibility? Well, the variant, the Omicron variant of concern carries some genetic changes we have seen previously in other variants, but never altogether in one virus, in the same virus. And it also has novel mutations that we have not been seen before. In total, the variant's genome has some deletions and around 50 mutations, including more than 30 in the so-called spike protein, is the part of the virus in the surface that interacts with human cells before cell entry. And that has been the primary target for current vaccines. Importantly, the effects of most of the remaining Omicron mutations are not known, resulting in a high level of uncertainty. These differences seem to make Omicron less vulnerable to human defenses, especially to antibodies, not so much to cellular immunity, but antibodies. That is the main target of vaccines. The fourth question for a medical doctor who attends patients is if the clinical presentations of Omicron is more severe. Early reports, especially from South Africa, link Omicron with mild disease, but it's affecting younger people. These reports are still based on anecdotes or scraps of data that can be misleading. So we need to wait for more data. The fifth point is to know if can Omicron overcome immunity from vaccines or just a previous infection. and it seems that the new variant has some capacity to evade immunity. The Omicron's so-called SARS in the South Africa may be associated with capacity to infect people who recovered already from COVID, caused by a dangerous variant, the Delta 1, and other variants, as well as those who have been vaccinated. And take into account that in South Africa, around 1/4 of the people, of the population, is already vaccinated. For instance, in the 2021 paper written by Dr. Jeste in Nature, a virologist who designed a new mutated version of the SARS-CoV-2 with a mutated spike, realized that the vaccine designed using this mutated, the lab mutated virus could be effective against this new strain. So that's good. So we have some hope, and we have the hope that T cells are still effective against this virus, and also the so-called natural killer cells that are important in the defense and protection against the active severe COVID-19. So another question, the sixth one, is to know if just being boostering the immune protection against Omicron should be effective. Well, so far, most COVID vaccines have been remained effective in preventing severe COVID-19 hospitalization or death for all previous variants, because this efficacy may be more dependent on T cell immune responses than antibodies, make us think that it should be a good idea. In fact, the threat of Omicron has prompted some rich countries like the United Kingdom to accelerate and broaden the rollout of COVID vaccine booster doses. But it's not yet clear how effective these doses will be against this variant. The explanation is that if we have a variant that is antigenically distant and it is neutralized at a certain level of antibody, there is something we can do. We can boost the overall antibody levels, because sometimes quantity can compensate the lack of match. What has Omicron spread out, and how are the scientists tracking it? In terms of diagnostic, the Omicron variant is detectable only widely using PCR platforms in South Africa. One of the variant's mutations leads to the so-called S-gene target failure, what is like a S-gene dropout, meaning that one of the several areas that the gene that are targeted by the PCR testing gives a false negative. But they can be used as a surrogate marker, allowing genome sequencing to be targeted, particularly where circulating strains are predominantly S-gene positive, as in the case in which Delta variant. More countries are detecting Omicron variant, but the capacity to rapidly sequence viruses from positive COVID-19 is concentrated in wealthy countries, meaning that early data on Omicron spread will be skewed. What will be the future? Well, we can't think about it, but we have not certainly. There will be a collapse. Well, most of informations say that do not panic about Omicron variant. WHO says it, so it's important. So, more and longer existing public health prevention measures, including lockdowns, the use of masks, isolations, should be a solution. But of course, it will make people feel frustrated, angry, and fear on the future of welfare, and this will affect their mental health. As Benjamin Franklin said, wars like this virus war are not paid in the wartime. The bill comes later. So perhaps this bad news about the fifth variant, the Omicron one, will still foster changing determinants of our society. a new model of interaction. We know a lot of children who have not been in the street without masks or without looking at people with masks. Perhaps when they're older, we have to explain them what happened. Students that have not been a long time at the higher school classrooms, all people who have been isolated for long times and have not known his grandchildren developing a cave syndrome. And international landscape, of course, some social straits are suffering, especially geographical areas more impacted. The contrast between city and country residency, old and young, and the only good thing of that should be that perhaps we are advancing on the digitalization of many activities. Some of the results are good, or that should not be so good. So that is my impression about what is happening and the information I have about the science and medicine about COVID, the Omicron variant of COVID. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manuel, for sharing a lot of information with us that we'll all find useful. At this point, I'd like to bring on Dr. Mukherjee. Dr. Mukherjee is a senior interventional cardiologist and the director of the cardiology department at Medicover Hospitals. He is the founding partner of Angioplasty Associates, a thriving interventional cardiology group. He is among the finest cardiologists, having experience of over 8 years and extensive knowledge in the field of medicine. Welcome, Dr. Mukherjee, and thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Savita. Thank you. And I'd like to be brief here, but I'd like to point out certain things about Omicron variant that Mr. Manuel has not already pointed out. Now, one, we are certain that it is more transmissible than the Delta variant. By how much? The estimates vary, but most figures say around 3.5 times is the maximum that we are talking about now. Now, this number comes from two things. One, the RT levels that are measured between the Delta as well as the Omicron, and the two, day-to-day case increases. Like with these two figures, we can come to know that it is definitely transmitting more faster than the Delta. Okay, that is number one. Number two, it looks like it is bypassing immunity to certain extent, both natural immunity and as well as the vaccine-given immunity. Both of these things, it is bypassing to certain extent to infect people. That is number two. Three, regarding the severity, this is what we've been waiting to hear about. This is what people are not certain about. The first two things are already given. The third thing is about the severity of the illness, and where we have some direct information from the Schwane Medical Center, Steve Biko Medical Center in South Africa. What they say is, this looks pretty mild. 70% of the people who are admitted in the hospital don't have oxygen support. Only 30% have oxygen support. And in between November 15 and November 30, they have roughly 10 deaths out of 160 people admitted. And then this mortality rate is much lesser than before, where the Delta was sweeping. So it is milder. And then what we have to understand, what we have to be more careful about, is the fact that 10% of the admitted population is children. That is more important. Children have been admitted with more number of in the Omicron, with the Omicron variant. But none of the children died. And the other point that is important to be made is, out of 38 patients that are in ICCU in Steve Biko Medical Center, only 6 are vaccinated. Only 6 are vaccinated. That means that vaccines are giving some sort of protection, though not 100% against the infection. They are giving good amount of protection against hospitalization or perhaps death. Perhaps death, I'm saying, because this data regarding the safety or severity of the Omicron variant is still in a very early stage. Because usually once the numbers rise, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, the hospitalizations will rise. And after next 2 to 3 weeks, then the mortality will begin to show. Now, this is early. Test positivity rates have gone up. The second thing is in relation to India. In India, what we have thought about is a couple of months ago, we had a zero surveillance data saying that 70% of the population have antibodies against COVID-19. And then most of the people, most even doctors think that these 70% are protected and the rest 30% may have the Omicron variant. Let me tell you that the 70% of the people with antibodies are not all protected, because the antibodies are not exact correlation of protection. We don't have an exact correlation of protection against infection. We don't have an exact correlation of protection against the hospitalization or death. This is still under investigation. Definitely the antibody levels correlate to a certain extent, but exactly at what threshold we can call the person protected is not yet known. So we have to remember that we cannot try for an herd immunity, let the Omicron rip through the population, who are the rest 30%, so that we can have immunity in them as well. This approach is not going to work and it is dangerous. There are 12 patients of Omicron in India right now, and many pockets of infection are happening in India. A lot of colleges are telling that some 50 to 60 people are getting infected at one time, and then they're shutting down the colleges. So a new wave is poised to come into India. So it could be driven by the Omicron variant. What we know so far, it is more transmissible, and then it can evade immunity, but we are not certain that it is more or less severe also. People are saying that it is less severe. It is, I'd like to remind them, it is too early to call it less severe. If it is faster, it is going to cause morbidity and mortality, regardless of how virulent the virus is. Regarding the clinical features, it is slightly different from the Delta. Now we have more amount of body aches and weakness, profound weakness. That's what people are suggesting, rather than loss of smell and taste that was seen in Delta. That is a fundamental difference. And then one more difference is more predominantly younger people have been infected. And once the more aged population gets infected, perhaps we might see a different clinical picture altogether. We need to brace ourselves. We should give the people confidence. They don't have panic, not because the Omicron can be mild, because the existing amount of precautions and the existing models of treatment with these kind of things, we can face this variant very well. So we have to give them hope based on the fact that we can face this variant, not saying that the Omicron variant is a milder variety, because that will lead to them not following COVID appropriate behavior properly. So we need to tell people the fact that we don't know about the severity of this virus yet. What we know is we can face it. We can prevent it with masking and distancing, and then we can treat it with the available resources, though the monoclonal antibodies may have slightly lesser efficacy because of 32 spike mutations, 10 receptor binding protein mutations, and 3 mutations in the furin cleavage site. Thank you very much, Sabita. That will be my take.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mukherjee, for sharing this with us. Our next guest is Dr. Julie Jeste. She's a physician in internal medicine and graduated from Albert Einstein College of Medicine. She also serves as the chief resident during training. She currently works for the New York State Office of Mental Health and Northwell Hospitals, which is New York's largest healthcare provider. Previously, Dr. Jeste has served as a medical director and attending physician in medicine at Bronx Lebanon College in New York. Her work as a hospitalist involves caring for patients who are admitted to the hospital, along with those that are critically ill. At the height of the pandemic, she is said to have worked an average of 60 to 80 hours a week in order to meet the extraordinary demands in healthcare, coming away with a sense of added moral responsibility. Dr. Jyoti, on behalf of the team and the world at large, we thank you for your service, especially those long hours in the height of the pandemic. Welcome, Dr. Jyoti.
Thank you, Dr. Sabita. I'd like to welcome everybody here, my fellow panelists, and thank you to Lead India for giving me this opportunity. May I just ask if you could please share the presentation with me?
Sabita, would you do that or you want me to do that?
I think Massimo was going to do it, but if you want to, Dr. Harry,
Okay,
you
okay.
can.
Let me do it. Yeah, I'm doing it.
Yeah, we could.
Can you see the presentation?
Yeah, we could just put it in
Yes.
slideshow format
Okay, yes, I did.
and then go to the first slide.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so I just wanted to, after what we've heard from Dr. Mukherjee and Dr. Manuel, I'd like us to just take a step back and look at, before we address the elephant in the room, Omicron, let's just talk about what is it that we are dealing with right now. Around us globally, it's a global problem, which is why it's called a pandemic. Unfortunately, there's millions of people right here in America who are refusing doses. They just have made choices because of various factors to not accept the vaccine. We do have the luxury here in America of having a supply of vaccine much greater than the demand for quite some time now. But given that we have vaccine hesitancy, it's unfortunate that we remain vaccinated. Fully vaccinated American population is just at 54%. Also considering all of the information that we see out here in the media from scientifically illiterate sources, there's a lot of vaccine misinformation that surrounds the common man. There's global disparity in vaccine distribution, which is responsible for vaccine inequities. There's also differences in vaccine availability between low-income countries and rich countries. There's also the concern with what these viruses actually do, how they infect, and why they mutate, and why these mutations tend to be such a challenge to us, even after 24 months of having been exposed to the first coronavirus vaccine. Transmissibility, severity of illnesses, and the reason patients get hospitalized and eventually death is one of the biggest concerns of how these viruses operate. Thankfully, because of vaccination, the severity of illness and rates of hospitalization and thereby preventing death has significantly changed the narrative. Here is a little bit of data as to what we are dealing with. 54.9% of the entire global population has so far received just one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. What's important to know is low-income countries have only about 6.2% of people that have received at least one dose. Just to show you some examples of where we stand with COVID vaccination rates. Globally, it's at 42%. In the United States, as I pointed out, it's at 58%. Africa alone has 7%. And these are the numbers that reflect people who are fully vaccinated, which implies they've received both doses of the vaccine. On the left, there's a graph which shows the difference in income groups. And the one all the way at the lowest, the low income group, the vaccination rates are the lowest, as one would expect. And high income groups have the highest vaccination rates, both because of availability. And, I guess education comes along with that in terms of accepting, fact-checking with science and believing in the vaccine and going ahead with the vaccination. Before we move on to address and talk about Omicron, I thought we should just take a little bit of a sense of understanding of how these viruses work. Viruses are very simple particles. They have this genetic material in the core of the body, and this figure that you see with the pink shell, that refers to the protein shell. So the famous spike protein that everyone's talking about that's the exact point. The pink spike proteins that we see are the part that the virus attaches to the host cell, in this case, the human beings, and then it causes the infection. Viruses go through several processes to do anything to survive in the host. Once the vaccines were introduced, the viruses tend to continue to replicate because that is what they know how to do. They lack the machinery to replicate on their own. So they need a host to attach to and replicate. And in this case, the host reservoir is the human. Typically, it's not unusual for us to hear of mutations. Mutations are when the virus tends to replicate, it makes errors in that replication. And an error is called a mutation. As a result of the mutation, there is a variant that is formed. Just to show you in this slide, the flu virus that we all are familiar with and we all get annual flu shots is known to mutate much faster than the SARS coronavirus. And every year, as with every mutation that the flu virus brings about, scientists are able to tailor the vaccine to treat us with that particular variant each season. So the flu vaccine that we've taken in the prior year may not be the same as what we're receiving this year. It's just interesting to note that there is a slower rate of mutation with the coronavirus, though I know we've already seen 5 variants come through. All mutations are not worrisome. Some of the mutations tend to be minor and actually make the virus less infectious, while some mutations are here because this is an attempt on the viral particle to escape immunity that can be given to the host as a result of vaccination or as a result of natural immunity. If we could just go back to the virus slide. Thank you. There's just a sense of understanding that we can get protection from these viral infections as a result of past infection or because of vaccination. Past infection usually gives us vaccination that teaches the body's immune system to see the entire virus. Whereas the mRNA vaccine technology, it allows us to see the virus at multiple spots. And it also confers what is called B and T cell immunity, which is, for the layperson to understand, it teaches the body to recognize and to have memory of what was the prior exposure. With this belief, there is an understanding that as these variants come, not just because of the antibodies that the body has been taught to fight against the spike protein, but because these memory cells are trained, the body is trained to produce these memory cells which recognize and act against whichever variant is presented. So the good news is that these vaccines, from what we know, this is a very general information that I'm sharing, is from what we know, mRNA technology would allow variants, would give us immunity against variants. Next slide, please. So let's address the elephant in the room, Omicron. We first learned about the Omicron virus on November 24th when South Africa kindly, with all due diligence, reported it and shared it with the world, for which we are grateful, because this is going to be, the data that they've shared with us is extremely important in the weeks ahead to understand and learn a little more about this virus. Shortly was followed by Europe, and now the World Health Organization has identified this as a variant of concern, and we have about 22 countries where this variant has been identified. The 3 pressing questions that we have at hand is how contagious is the Omicron compared to its the other variants? Does this variant cause more significant disease? And will this variant, do we get immunity against this variant with the current vaccines and any kind of past infection that one may have had? The answer is we simply do not know much about Omicron. It appears to be more transmissible. It appears to only cause mild symptoms, especially in the vaccinated. It appears that mostly unvaccinated and partly vaccinated patients are the ones that are being hospitalized. All of this is based on data that's been coming in from South Africa. Again, this is data that we still, have to continue to receive. We need more time to monitor more people. We need more time to understand disease patterns in vaccinated and unvaccinated people. I'd like us to think about 2 scenarios. What is the best case scenario with Omicron? One, the Omicron can cause less severe illness and it works with the current vaccine. That's the best case scenario. What's the worst case scenario? Omicron could cause a severe illness. It could escape possibly the immunity that is conferred by either past infection or vaccination. But the good news is that we know now what we didn't know a year ago. We know so much more about how the coronavirus works. We have resources, we have the ammunition to combat the coronavirus infection. There is possibility with technology to reconfigure these vaccines to target the special variant called Omicron. The good news is also there that the current PCR testing and the rapid antigen testing that exists in the market are able to detect the Omicron. There's also some good news. US is getting ready to authorize and approve 2 drugs that are in the pipeline, antiviral drugs, one of which is molnupiravir, piravir and another called pavloxid. So both of these have been reported to work against variants, including Omicron. Next slide, please. So we've seen what the problem is that we're dealing with. We've seen the concern and the hype that is about Omicron. We're trying to understand a little bit more about what Omicron means to the community and to the public health at large. What would the solution be in this case? Vaccinate unvaccinated. Get a booster dose if you're eligible. Just recently, on November 29, the CDC recommends and opens up the booster vaccine for all adults above 18 if they're eligible, which means if it's been 6 months since your last Moderna or Pfizer vaccine or 2 months since a J&J vaccine, you would be considered eligible for the booster vaccine, irrespective of any other risk factors that you may or may not have. It's important to not forget that we need to continue to take care of physical health. Important to also tend to your mental health. Seek help if you need therapy, counseling, anything to combat this pandemic that we've been dealing with for the past 24 months. Act kindly to yourself and to others. We've known that simple acts of kindness can improve happy hormones like dopamine and serotonin, thereby alleviating any kind of anxiety and improving our mood. It's important to engage in dialogues like the one that Lead India has given us an opportunity today. It's important to amplify the voices of physicians and scientists. Always know when you read something, before you always want to fact check and trust the source before you get influenced by what you read. Tune out the noise around us and let's take it one day at a time. Next slide, please. Just some points to consider. So we are in the midst of a pandemic. We know that mutations, as I showed you, exist with viral infections. We know that once we do have the ammunition to combat the viral infection that we're dealing with. Once the global cases come down, the pandemic could be downgraded to an endemic. And eventually the numbers could come down to something as simple as a seasonal infection, just like how we have a flu and a common cold. The good news is that we know how to combat this. We have vaccines, we have natural immunity from past infection, and the progress in medical science. Will the vaccines work against the mutated variants? Time will tell us. 2022, let's look forward with a hope for newer vaccines. The vaccines could be reconfigured as we're being told by the manufacturers. There's 2 new drugs in the pipeline. And the beauty of these are very, very powerful treatments. There's a lot of, while we keep talking about the importance of vaccination, we need to address the fact that there are going to be people who will refuse vaccination. But the solution to people who develop symptoms would be, as far as we know, based on the 2 drugs, if they have simple infection, if they have mild to moderate symptoms, and they're recognized within the first 5 days of presentation, these 2 drugs are very promising. It's a simple outpatient therapy, about 5 days of treatment, which means that people who choose not to get vaccinated and tend to get symptomatic, or people who are immunocompromised or cancer patients, if they have symptoms and they're not adequately protected by vaccination, these 2 drugs offer hope for outpatient treatment of this infection. There is talk about Omicron-specific boosters as early as 2022, and the vaccine manufacturers are already looking into releasing these. It's the vaccine mandates in high-risk professions like the healthcare industry only continues to confer that we protect the public and improve health outcomes for one and all. It's very important to continue to work towards getting vaccines available across all countries. The rich countries should be able to buy and supply and improve vaccination rates in low-income countries. Know that most of us will eventually acquire immunity, either through vaccination or exposure, and thereby we will lower the severity of illness, and thereby reducing the availability of hosts for these viruses to replicate. We will need global solutions to end this global pandemic. I'd like to end by talking about something that I've read. When we accept the unpleasant realities of what we cannot change, and we focus our thoughts and energies towards what we can change, and continue to fact check, we are better equipped to cope with these uncertainties. I'd just like to say, stay safe and don't panic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Jyoti. Our next speaker is Dr. Hussein Vado. He's a professor of clinical anatomy at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. Dr. Hussein, welcome.
Good evening to you, everybody. Dr. Sabita Badasi Singh, thank you for hosting this. And I would like to express my gratitude and thanks from South Africa to Dr. Hari Panpali and the colleagues who have hosted me this afternoon. I see my colleagues have discussed the Omicron virus pandemic quite significantly and quite extensively, going into the genetics and going into the clinical pictures and so on. But what I would like to concentrate on in the limited time that I have available is the impact the Omicron virus in particular and COVID-19 pandemic in general here in South Africa. Now, before I carry on with that, I would like to mention that right now I'm in an emergency department of a hospital. And just before commencing this webinar, I saw a patient who came in with symptoms highly suggestive of the typical coronavirus pattern. Of course, we are all geared up with protective personal equipment. And I was fortunate enough that we diagnosed this quickly. We did a rapid test and it was positive. Now, the symptoms were not insignificant, like it has been mentioned for Omicron. It was quite classical symptoms of a sore throat, upper respiratory tract infection, progressing down, and it only started yesterday. The point I'm mentioning this young lady's case, she's 23, by the way, is that here in South Africa, although we have identified the Omicron variant initially discovered on the 18th of November by a general practitioner in the province of Gauteng, where she saw a whole number of students presenting with body aches and non-specific symptoms. It was formally announced, I think, on the 25th by the national media in South Africa. I would like to caution that here we are seeing a mixed picture. Although the rates of infection are rising dramatically and exponentially from 11,616 to yesterday 16,055. I don't have the figure for today, but it will be available later on in the evening. And these are new infections which have been tested as positive for coronavirus, for COVID, Omicron infections, and it's a real problem for us. Now, please appreciate that in South Africa, after the dismantling of apartheid, there's a bimodal society that we have here. We have the extremely affluent on one hand, which has first world medicine access to the patient, and then in the rural communities and in informal settlements, we have third world conditions where patients don't even have access to primary health care. So this is the first problem we have here. Second problem is that this pandemic has attacked us. And the first case was discovered last year on the 5th of March, 2020, the first case of COVID-19. It was against the background of HIV infections, AIDS, compounded by TB of various sorts, of various kinds, including pulmonary TB, TB meningitis, TB of the kidneys, and so on. So we are now faced with a double-edged sword of Omicron Delta 4 variant on a base of malnourished people who have been exposed to HIV, TB, and other infectious diseases. Now, when I was invited to this webinar, Dr. Panpali actually asked me to talk about the impact of Omicron on South Africa. So what I like to mention, I mean, most of us know what the common impacts are, but there are a couple of specific impacts that South Africa has suffered as a result of the Omicron virus in the last week or so. And the first one is that the travel bans, and everybody knows about that, that have been imposed rather expediently and without scientific basis, has affected our tourism industry absolutely significantly. And just to give you a background, international hotel chains like the Hilton Hotel in Durban was closed down last year. Its doors. Hopefully it's temporary, but it's closed down. So the tourism industry has been significantly affected in South Africa to the detriment of the masses, because they depend on tourists to generate income and inject funds into the national economy of the country. The second area of impact is that because of remote teaching, and this is something we have to seriously consider about, because although I'm a practicing emergency physician, I also teach, and we have found that with remote teaching, the impact is quite significant, because remember, we are not training architects, we are training healthcare professionals, both medical students, nursing students, specialists in various disciplines, and therefore they have to be hands-on when it comes to medical training or healthcare training. So with COVID-19 pandemic and trying to run classes on Zoom and remote platforms, digital platforms, it is a significant setback for us. And this has actually impacted on our training and the outcome performances of our graduates. This is borne out statistically by the higher number of litigations we are seeing in South Africa at all levels, including basic doctors or basic healthcare professionals, as well as specialist areas as well. So it's something we need to work on, and perhaps some mechanisms that could be suggested by my colleagues here who are also academic and into research would be beneficial to our medical schools here in South Africa. The third aspect I like to briefly allude to regarding this Omicron variant is the problem or the specter of anti-vaxxers or vaccine hesitancy. I really wouldn't like to call it vaccine hesitancy, because there's no hesitancy. They are quite point blank refusing to be vaccinated. And there are all sorts of theories and counter theories coming about, and conspiracy theories coming about regarding vaccination. And we suffered a similar problem previously when we had the epidemic of HIV and TB as well. So here we have a large body of individuals, not necessarily from rural areas, not necessarily from socially disadvantaged communities, not necessarily from uneducated communities as well. Some of these anti-vaxxers are highly educated professionals. Some of them are even my colleagues, who would say categorically that, look, they are not interested in vaccine for several reasons, and they will give you a profound scientific background that why they don't want to take the vaccine. First of all, they will tell me that, look, there are patients dying from vaccines, although it's a small amount. Secondly, they will tell me that the vaccines have been fast-tracked thanks to the former President Donald Trump, who initiated the Operation Warp Speed, if you recall, just before he resigned or retired. And this, they feel that there is insignificant or statistically not significant evidence to really promote the vaccine with their patients and in the community at large. Then there's another group of community or patients in South Africa who will not be vaccinated for religious reasons as well. They feel that the vaccine has been cultured in animal tissue, of course erroneously, and therefore they cannot take it. So we have a real challenge here in South Africa, going on media, going on talk shows, holding community talks by remote Zoom meetings to educate the people in vaccination. And in fact, I have a friend who works with the Pfizer vaccine development in the company here in South Africa. And she has been doing excellent work to no avail, I must say. So that's another problem we have here. Apart from all these other problems of unemployment, closing down of small businesses, closing down of informal traders on the streets in South Africa, as you might have realized. And I'm sure that this is the situation in India as well. The other associated impacts we are having, and this is something quite important, I think, is that, and I'm sure it's not specific to South Africa, is that of environmental pollution. And it's an interesting scenario that is occurring and unfolding here right in front of our eyes in South Africa. We are in Durban, which is a major coastal city along the east coast of South Africa. And here we find that because of COVID pandemic, the restaurants are closed, the hotels are closed, and we are kind of outdoor nation because we have excellent beaches, and perhaps one day if you're down in South Africa, we can take you around and be our guest. We have excellent beaches with golden sands, lovely bright sun, and we are now constrained by the lockdowns to our homes. So what we are doing, we are ordering by Uber, and I'm not promoting Uber. We are ordering food as takeaways in one of single-use plastic packaging. And when the people are finished with this, they dispose of it, sometimes in informal settlements as well. And this is actually contaminating or congesting the rivers, which then flow into the oceans with disastrous consequences on the aquatic environment in South Africa again. So thousands of dolphins are dying. The fishes are poisoned with plastic waste directly as a result of COVID pandemic. And it's exacerbated further by the Omicron variant, which has been around for about 2 or 3 weeks. There's another problem as well, and that is the informal sector doesn't have accessible healthcare, and they feel that they are being marginalized, and therefore they go on protests in terms of unemployment, poverty, lack of funds to keep them sustained due to the lockdowns and the lack of tourists. And actually criminal activities have increased. And you might have heard that kidnapping has become rife, hijackings have become rampant, cash in transit robberies of bank vehicles on major freeways you're talking about, are in progress as I speak. And again, it's a very unsafe situation that has resulted directly due to the pandemic lockdowns. On the positive side, it's interesting to note that alcohol was banned in the first lockdown, and due to vociferous protests by the alcohol industry in South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa has relaxed the alcohol ban. But just to notice that during the alcohol ban, the number of motor vehicle accidents decreased to such an extent that no multi-trauma patients were admitted to both the private and the public hospitals in South Africa. And this actually was a benefit because the empty beds were then redeployed to manage the seriously ill patients with COVID infections. The patterns we are seeing here is that the infections are serious. It is primarily due to 2 reasons. Firstly, there's a high incidence of type 2 diabetes in South Africa, which has a population of 59,572,000 odd people at the last census. And actually, the problem is that most of them, after the freedom in 1994, they have developed obesity. And truncal obesity and obesity itself, as most of my physician colleagues will tell us, is an independent risk factor in a patient acquiring a COVID infection. Firstly is that obesity, secondly is the diabetes, and then you have these other populations where they are immunocompromised due to HIV, AIDS, and TB, and also you have a large geriatric population who have got arthritis of different types, who are on steroids and other medications which suppresses the immune mechanism. So we have a great dilemma here that we are actually have a large patient base of aging population, of malnourished population that are targets for infections such as the COVID-19 pandemic and now the new variant Omicron. Also remember that there is a coexistence between the Delta infection, which is part of the fourth wave, as well as the newly developed mutated Omicron. We can only hope and pray that the good Lord helps us and He gives guidance to the scientists to overcome this pandemic by finding different vaccines to the continuously mutating viruses, and hopefully we have a better situation in the future. But I appeal that we keep in regular touch and perhaps exchange ideas digitally. My email address is available, and so is my mobile number. And I thank you all once again for allowing me to talk on this platform. Thank you very much, Dr. Bidasi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hussain. Our next guest is Dr. Salim Parker. Dr. Salim Parker is a general practitioner with an interest in Hajj travel. He has been accompanying pilgrims as a medical officer since 2000. Dr. Parker gives Hajj travel talks at Hajj classes in Cape Town and engages in extensive pre-travel consultations. He is also a medical coordinator for Jive 10-kilometer Big Walk, which is the biggest 10-kilometer walk in Africa and has about 20,000 participants annually. Welcome, Dr. Parker.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for the kind invitation to speak on this particular platform. It's difficult to follow in the footsteps of the esteemed speakers that preceded me. So I'll try to have a different approach as to how Omicron affected travel and especially how it affected travel in South Africa. Now, on the 25th of November, South Africa diligently reported the presence of this new variant. And unfortunately, the reaction of the world was completely contrary to what was expected. Whilst we were very proud of the fact that we could announce to the world that this has happened, in retrospect, there's been a lot of rethinking about how we should approach the discovery of another variant, if that has to happen, in light of how the rest of the world actually reacted to that announcement. First thing that was done was all borders were closed. Sounds, South Africa is a small country. They just stop people from going there and leaving South Africa. But the impact of it is quite profound. As Professor Woude already mentioned, a big sector of South Africa is actually involved in the tourist industry. And to put some figures to that, 1.5 million of about 58 million of the population is actively or indirectly involved in the tourism industry. Within 48 hours of the people being told that the travel restrictions will apply, 1.5 million cancellations took effect. So that means the tourism industry and the sector in South Africa, which is already on its knees, was given a further knockout blow as far as they're concerned, and some of them are not going to survive. That's a closing down of them. But those are just the measurable figures, the unmeasured ones. For example, families who could not meet each other now. For example, those people who were at the boarding gates of their flight and then were told, we're sorry, your flight is not going to take off. Those type of measures are not, those type of events are not actually measurable. So those are the effects that are what I call the unmeasurable ones. Now, how scientific were these sudden imposition of travel bans? Let's look at how COVID-19 is spread. The SARS-CoV-2 virus is a respiratory spread. We know that. And we know that, yes, even though the virus doesn't have wings, it is humans that give them, the virus doesn't fly, it's humans that give them wings. It is actually not easy and in fact impossible to stop the spread of the virus. The reasons are quite commonly known. The one is we know that there's asymptomatic spread, so someone could have had Omicron and actually not have symptoms. Secondly, he could have been tested, but because we know that the tests are about 30% false negative, that virus could have spread worldwide before it was first detected. And the evidence is mounting that it has actually spread or was found somewhere else before it was identified in South Africa. A case in Belgium was recently published where the traveler had no association with travel to South Africa, but he traveled to North Africa. And there was a cohort of 6 Scottish people who were found to be positive with no travel history, and as far as we know, no contact with anyone who's traveled recently. So clearly, the variant, as is becoming more evident, is worldwide already. It just hasn't been detected to the same extent as it has been in South Africa. And again, to indicate how easily viruses spread, if we go back to 2009 with swine flu, which we all know started off in Mexico City, if we have had to impose travel restrictions on Mexico City, and this was modeling that was done at that time, if we had to stop 40% of people leaving Mexico City on their flights, the virus spread of swine flu in 2009 would have slowed down by only 2 days. So if we had to go a bit more extreme and stop 90% of people leaving Mexico City, the spread of the virus worldwide would have been slowed down by only 2 weeks. So the bottom line is that respiratory viruses are not easily stopped from spreading. And unfortunately, the draconian measures that were imposed had a profound effect, like I've already just described. I myself was overseas when the virus was announced, and I had to make a hasty decision. Do I stay where I am and then possibly face the real possibility of that airline suddenly deciding to stop flying passengers to South Africa? They already decided not to take passengers out of South Africa. So these are the issues that really impacted the travel industry at large. What are we fearing in South Africa? Now, currently, we are seeing the numbers increasing on a day-to-day basis quite exponentially, like Dr. Wada very eloquently described. The numbers have, if we look at the rise in the curve compared to the first 3 waves, we are seeing a much steeper increase on a day-to-day basis compared to the first 3 waves. We have been anticipating the 4th wave to start occurring at the end of November, early December. So we are actually preparing for a 4th wave in South Africa. We weren't prepared for the Omicron variant, and there are 2 major concerns we have as far as it is concerned. The one is that we are seeing a number of reinfections. Now, they tend to be mild, yes, but we don't know what the long-term effect of it is going to be. We have already heard from the previous speakers that it takes about 2 weeks for people to be infected and then hospitalized, and then another week or so before we can start measuring deaths. So we're very early on so far, but the signs are all showing that these cases currently are milder. But if we're looking at a healthcare system, if, for example, the numbers are quite large, 1% of 100 is completely different to 1% of 100,000 being infected, new infections over a short period. And yesterday we had 16,000 new infections. So is our healthcare system going to cope with that? That's the first question that we are looking at and actually have to prepare for. The second question is the issue of reinfections. We are seeing our healthcare workers actively being infected at the moment. They are exposed to a variant that we know is more infectious. Whether it's going to be milder or whether it's going to lead to less deaths, like the previous speakers have expounded upon, we don't know yet. But if a high number of healthcare workers are infected, they have to be isolated. And our concern is there going to be enough healthcare workers available to actually man the hospitals, even though we have good enough resources currently available? So these are the factors that we are currently looking at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Park. And I'd like to ask all the presenters to stay on to the panel discussion. We're going to go quickly into the innovation video. And I'd like to ask Nasima or Mr. Ram to share it.
Yeah, Dr. Savita, I'm going to share it.
So while that is being shared, I would like to state that the Lead India Foundation has been hosting this series of webinars, and we follow Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, the 11th President of India, who really transformed the youth into responsible citizens and tried to engage them in the developing the nation. On his 89th birth anniversary, we did a global event with 148 speakers from 47 different countries, focusing on the sustainable development goals, health, education, environment, agriculture, peace and harmony. And this year on his 90th birth anniversary on October 15th, we did another major event with 130 sustainable development goals warriors. We call them SDG warriors, who are contributing to the SDGs to preserve and protect the planet for future generations. In addition to this health and education related webinars, we also did another mega event in Bengaluru, India. We honored 111 power women who really contributed to transform the world in 111 minutes. That also ended up as a world record event. In addition to these, on October 2nd in 2020, on the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, we launched an innovation challenge to invite from the young minds creative solutions for sustainable development of the planet. Those are the few of the small little things we captured, simple things, but can go a long way. Now our host will play that video for your information, just a brief video. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hari.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Jakob Fagland here. I'm here to tell you about micro-investing, an approach to end hunger for smallholders. Smallholders represent 7 out of 10 of the world's hungry and are just rarely getting a job outside their sector. There is profitable options though, although they are usually not very available for the smallholders. What we need to do is kitify drip lines, maybe 2 times 15 meters, and related connectors with just a few high quality seeds, enough for the bed. And the same, just a few 100 grams of water soluble fertilizer, enough for 3 months for 15 square meter. By doing that, you get an investment, maybe $7, maybe $10, and that investment will return 5 to 15 times the money back in just 3 months. You reinvest some and you do the same again and again. When you've done it 3 times, we see people often getting $10 a day. Going from $1 a day to $10 a day is going from the bottom billion to the upper half of the world's population from an income point of view. That is micro-investing. And I've been working on it together with a few other friends in Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia for the last 5 years. So to learn more, check out my TEDx. You find more on my LinkedIn profile. You can also go to Norwegian Church Aid, who is the NGO who's involved in this. And I hope that many more will get involved in making micro-investing available for poor people around the world.
Hi, I'm Joseph Noll from the Basic Internet Foundation. Our goal is to connect the unconnected and give everyone free access to information, which should be a human right.
We connect where nobody thinks that we are able to connect, in Tsilela, in Isasi. And we empower our communities to connect. Please listen to Catherine.
Hey, Joseph.
Hi.
This is me with the team. This is Ben, the IT, and I'm Dr. Mkononi, the representative. We are here connecting the village of Kiparanganda. So yeah, behind us, is the antenna, I think. Yeah, it's very long, and but yeah, so far so good. The internet is very strong where we are, and yes, this is by the roadside. Yay, a very potential place. So yay. Basic internet, thank you for connecting one more village. Peace.
Okay, Dr. Savita, back to you, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Narsima, for playing that video. And this is done through a very big global platform called Induct, based in Oslo, Norway. And they are the LinkedIn of the entrepreneurs, and the innovation challenge is still going on, and we are making humble attempt to bring the simple solutions to reach the unreachable. That's what our intent is, and this is going a long way. Thank you so much for everybody. Please join the panel discussion then. Thank you, Sabita.
Thank you, Dr. Harry. Dr. Mahinda will now run the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Sabita. That was a wonderful information that shared by all the eminent speakers. Thank you so very much. You have touched to various aspects of the pandemic, vaccines, variants and all those things. So thank you so much for the information. I have a few questions to all the panel members. So first, I would like to start with Dr. Hussein Wadwa, if he's around. All right, I'll go.
Dr. Hussein is Dr. Hussein, can you turn on your video so that you can be spotlighted, if you can? I know you are in the hospital, but Dr. Deval, when he comes back, you can ask the question.
We can go, yes. So now I can ask Dr. Jyoti my next question. So, Dr. Jyoti, you have mentioned very important points about these vaccines, and even how the virus infects the cell, what is the virus, how the variants are evolving, all this information. So my question to you is, in the US, you can see that the Omicron variant on December 1st, Omicron variant was discovered only in one state, which is in San Francisco. But when next day morning I woke up, when I saw the news, it says 12 states were identified. So what do you think, how rapidly it is going to spread out in the US, and what kind of precautions do you think we have to take to avoid this rapid spread of the Omicron? Not only the Omicron, but if you compare it to the from past few weeks, last 2 weeks, the case, the positive cases are being increased all over the US. So what do you think could be the reason for this? Is this the Omicron, or something else is in the United States also already, and a different variant probably could have started? These are the two questions. And my third question to you is, you have already mentioned that CDC recommends a third booster dose for the adults. And then we also have children over 5 years started getting the vaccines. But there are some people, again, Dr. Wada said that, they're not vaccine hesitants, vaccine protesters. Protesters say that, do we really have to take that third booster dose? Why is it so important? Why not 2 doses are sufficient? What would you like to message? What kind of message you would like to convey to the people that, they're kind of lenient on taking the third dose? How important it is? Can you please shed some light on it?
Okay, sure. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Deval. So that's all of them very good questions. As I said, we are still learning a lot about the Omicron variant. You're right. We first heard about it in one country, then we heard about it in another, then we heard about it entering the US, one state leading on to several states now. You have to understand that every time there is a report of a variant, the minute every person who develops any kind of symptoms, I'm talking about a simple cold, testing has increased, right? So we'll just talk about America. So you woke up, last night there was one state, and then you woke up seeing that there were many more states involved. And the reason for that is what we are understanding is it is a transmissible variant, right? Transmissibility implying it will continue to, this variant has emerged. It's looking around to find hosts. The quick targets are people who are unvaccinated, partially vaccinated, and people who are fully vaccinated but have a lot of risk factors, right? If people are immunocompromised, the virus is still able to enter their bodies and cause some kind of infection, which we call breakthrough infection. The variant is here in the environment, so it's looking around for hosts, and that's the reason that transmissibility will continue to rise. Because of the awareness of the variant, every person with a symptom is more likely to go and get some medical attention, go out there and get tested. So increased testing leads to increased case detection. A year ago, we were worried about every case that was detected. But I think it's good news. The more we hear, it's important to understand that the more people get tested, we are able to classify what are the different spectrum, of severity this variant is causing. So the more people go out there to get tested, public health officials are able to collect data that there is an infection, and they're able to quantify, is it mild, moderate, or severe? And all of this is very important to understand as the weeks go by, to get a better sense of what Omicron can do. So we shouldn't be concerned as we continue to hear both within the US and outside the US of increasing number of cases. Again, as I said, we don't know enough to come to conclusions. We understand that it could continue to be transmitted. What are the different prevention and care strategies that one must take in the setting of this new variant? Use the ammunition that our individual countries are offering us. So I'll focus on the United States, given that I'm working here and I'm able to give firsthand information. The vaccines are here. Anybody who has not completed their vaccine should go ahead. This is the time, to complete that second dose. If there is any kind of questions and concerns, there's enough resources. Health professionals are more willing and more confident about, they have a better sense of understanding. So please talk to friends, talk to your doctors, find out any questions, have concerns addressed. If you're not willing to vaccinate, talk to family members, find out what is the concerns they're having about vaccination and things like that. So continue to improve vaccination rates. For the booster dose, the CDC has recommended initially the booster dose only for people who are immunocompromised and those with risk factors, because studies have shown that the antibodies that the vaccines teach our body to make do come down with time. The antibody, which is the immunity given by the antibody, does wane with time, which is why the booster dose becomes effective. If there was no variant, so think of it like you have a contagious environment, right? You understand that the ammunition that was given to you, the immunity is decreasing, but the trigger or the antigen in the environment is very much rampant. It's important more than ever now that we have this Omicron variant. If you are eligible, if one is eligible for the booster dose, we strongly recommend that you go and receive that booster dose, because the antibody titers and the immunity conferred to you by the primary dose we know for a fact that it will wane with time. And both Pfizer and Moderna have determined that time period to be about 6 months. So it's a good, we do not recommend going and checking your titers and seeing, what is the level of antibodies that I have. When they start going down, I'll go take the vaccination. That is not recommended. It's not a cost-effective public strategy. The boosters are freely available in the US. It's as simple as walking into a pharmacy and just getting a booster dose. So I strongly recommend that we do that. Continue to mask in places of closed settings, especially in an unfamiliar setting. So if you're not in your bubble, it's very important to mask and to avoid, closed contained spaces, especially in the setting of the variant. Mask mandates had kind of relaxed before the Omicron. So before the Omicron, I would always wear the mask I always continue to wear the mask in the hospital. But if I'm at home and I'm hosting a dinner or a party with about 10 friends, I recently attended an event, I'm talking about before the Omicron, I did bring down my mask. The reason I did not wear my mask, the reason being is I have fully protected myself. I've fully taken both doses of the vaccine. Once the booster was rolled out and I was eligible for it, I did go ahead and receive my booster shot. I do not, by practice, check my antibody titers because I believe in science. I understand how the vaccines work. But I was able to attend events with the confidence that the people that were in the event I knew were all vaccinated. And so what I'm trying to say is, as when you are dealing, the holidays are coming. So if this is a closed network of people that you trust and you know have been vaccinated, it's okay to not wear the mask. But it's highly recommended that if you haven't been vaccinated or if you've completed more than 6 months since your primary vaccine, please do go and get that booster. And that's the only way that we can prevent and protect ourselves. I hope that answers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jyoti. That certainly answers the questions. Basically what you would like to recommend is, if you are eligible to get the booster, go and get it. And if you host a party or if you go to a party, protect yourself. You keep continuing protecting yourself using a mask, which is very important and mandatory, not to get infected, even with the Omicron and any other variants. Thank you so much for your answer. Now, I have my second question is to Dr. Wawda. Dr. Wawda, you have explained very well the current situation in South Africa, including how vaccine protesters are protesting the vaccines. So my question to you is, so there was a beta variant in 2020, which also emerged in South Africa. And in the beginning days, like today in Omicron, lots of questions, lots of concerns saying that, this is going to go as a very infectious variant and it's escaping the immunity, and all these kind of concerns came in, but later on, they went away. So basically, right, and Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine was not that efficient on the beta variant and so on. Now, same kind of questions and concerns are coming on the Omicron variant, which makes people think that it could be also one of the variant like a beta variant, right? What would you like to say, whoever is thinking like this? How concerned you have to be with Omicron variant compared to the beta variant? Is there any comparison, or are they similar? Or Omicron is more powerful, more contagious than the beta variant? What would you like to say, based on your experience? You're muted, Dr. Wawda. You're muted. Can you please unmute yourself?
Right. Yeah. Thank you for raising that excellent question. First of all, I would like to mention that it would be speculation to answer that question realistically, because we don't have enough data, scientific data, nor do we have enough experience with the Omicron patients. It has just about 10 days or so since it has been recognized, and we are seeing patients now. Now, if you recall, I told you at the beginning of my address that I saw a patient with typical symptoms of the old COVID. And I suspect, before I came to this webinar, and I suspect that that is actually a Delta variant that we are looking at because of the symptoms of upper respiratory tract infection. Although the scientists tell us that the symptoms are mild. So we cannot be complacent, and I think that's the most important point we need to raise here. And Dr. Jeste has mentioned that, look, we cannot forget about masking and social distancing and the basic measures that we need to take in terms of preventing this. So we must be prepared for the worst. And I tell my students, and I was trained that way too, be prepared for the worst. And when something better happens, then you're not kind of caught unawares. So to answer your question, it would be extremely difficult to say what we are experiencing, because in South Africa, we have this problem of immunocompromised people. A large percentage of our patients are immunocompromised, and they are now subjected to this new variants. So therefore, the bottom line is that we need to observe all the basic measures, and as the scientists discover new therapeutic modes of modalities of treatment, then we can find a cure for that. But my personal opinion is that noting how the different strains have come about and how World Health Organization is naming the viruses rather than calling it South African virus or India virus or India strain, they have now used the Greek alphabet. Soon they'll run out of the Greek alphabet, and hope not that doesn't happen. But my personal opinion is that just as the flu virus, I think the coronavirus is here to stay for a long time. And our technology will be lagging a bit behind in terms of catching up. Having said that, my colleague Abdul Karim, who's an international scientist and virologist, epidemiologist, has published a paper, I think on the 2nd of December, which states that the symptoms are mild in terms of the severity of this Omicron infection. But I think personally, as a clinician as well, that we shouldn't be complacent about that, and we should really be on the lookout for things becoming aggravated with another massive death toll that we might be experiencing. Of course, remember, the picture in the United States might be different. The picture in India might be different. You'll have a billion people there. We have only 60 million people here. But it's a bimodal social distribution of patients. So the patients in the more affluent groups who are on medical insurance will have access to remdesivir and other high-end medications, whereas the ordinary person might just be content with buttermilk as a probiotic and using ivermectin, and they're surviving. I must say that. So although it's a grim scenario, the first thing we need to do is to work together. Secondly, we need to collaborate. Thirdly, we need to exchange ideas. And I've just sent a question off to everybody on the chat group. If I may just take 2 minutes to mention that question. And that is the use of convalescent plasma in treating our patients, noting that the virus is mutating on a regular and ongoing basis. So I would appreciate some opinions on that. Now, why I mention this particularly, because we follow NDTV in South Africa as well on our big screens. And there at the bottom, we used to see appeals going out by various individuals on NDTV. I don't know if it's broadcast in India as well. Is that it's appeals at the bottom. It says that certain person needs plasma, and if you such and such a group, please go to such and such a center to donate your plasma so that some poor soul can benefit from that therapeutic modality. So I would like some information as to what the local feeling is in India with now the emergence of this Omicron variant. And of course, there'll be more variants coming. But I think science should be on top of it because, as we know, the COVID virus particle doesn't have a shield, as it were, against attack. And I think that's an important point to remember that. It doesn't have a capsule.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bob. Yeah, when the beta variant evolved, there was no breakthrough infection. Not that many breakthrough infections were noticed. But now we are noticing more and more breakthrough infections. Means that we need to be concerned, certainly, to take precautionary measures to fight with these upcoming variants and waves. Thank you so much, Dr. Bob, for your answer.
Thank you, sir, for raising that question.
My next question is to Dr. Manuel. Dr. Manuel, so even you mentioned in your talk, and then other speakers also mentioned that, the number of mutations in this particular Omicron variant, there are 50 mutations. So taking the number, usually the mutation tendency is the virus natural instinct. Viruses tend to mutate all the time. But nowadays, recently, we are talking about the number of mutations, 50, 20, 30. How do you see this? Is it really concerning? These 50 mutations could be, nonsense mutations and then it may go away. Or it could be stronger mutations and then it become more and more stronger. Can you shed some light on this, people, so that people don't have to worry about the number of mutations?
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is a very good question because nature, biology, means that every species mutate for good and for the bad. In this case, we are quite worried because some mutations, known mutations, are for the bad because we have focused most of our research developing new treatments on the S spike because it's the main entrance of the virus on the cells to be replicated. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was in contact. I do not work at the hospital. I only work at research and School of Medicine, giving lectures. So some of the clinicians who were lost called me to know if, from my scientific knowledge, I could provide some additional information to design strategies. And well, we knew. Because, well, we have a big development of antiviral treatments because of AIDS, HVU. So how we could repositionate these drugs used for viral infections, and even some other products like, in that case, antimalarial drugs in the COVID treatment in the as first aid solution. It's waiting for a vaccine. And well, the vaccine was focused on the S protein. So the case of the Omicron is that mutations affect this target. Not only as the way to develop vaccines or the effectivity of vaccines, but also of the antibody generated by the body, by the patient. And even in some cases, some mutations affect on the detection, early detection of the disease, the PCR tests. So it's the bad part of the question. Not so much, it seems not to be so much in the case of the intensity of the symptoms and the possibility to die of it. Mainly on the effectivity of the vaccine, so the antibodies generated by the patient, and the early detection of the disease. And as this disease is appearing in people who have been vaccinated and who have suffered the disease, this is really maybe the most complete, the perfect environment for immune escape. But well, the virus has, at this moment, I have read something about the history of the Spanish flu, the 18th Spanish flu. And the evolution follows some patterns, has also dated, and the people has been adapted to the disease in time. But there are some parallelisms on the evolution, at least in Europe, and especially in Spain, of the 18th flu and what is happening with COVID. So in that case, we can be optimistic because the disease disappeared without treatments, only based on the accurate immunity. But well, of course, in this case, we have many scientists in the world working in other targets. The virus has also 4 antigens in their SARS, and there are a lot of people working, developing antibodies against these antigens. And not only that, because we are also working in other pathways of the virus invasion of cells. You know that the virus, this is information for somebody who's not expert in medicine, but the virus uses the human cell to replicate. So we have other targets in the human cell and the human enzymes or whatever, so that the virus cannot use our DNA to replicate and generate another viruses. So we are quite optimistic because the situation will be quite different.
Yeah, you're saying that we need to be concerned, but you should not be worried about this number of mutations at the moment. That's the take on that. Thank you so much. So my next question is to Dr. Parker. Dr. Parker, you have very well explained about how the travel industry has been impacted by this pandemic and with the rising variants and so on. So even though there's some traveling is ongoing, right? If you take in the US, the holiday season started, people tend to travel a lot, even by air or by bus or by car, anything. So what is the best travel modality you recommend to travel people in case they have to travel? And number one. And the second question is, what kind of precautionary measures they need to take when they're traveling internationally through aeroplanes or any other modalities? So this is my question to you. And the third question is, how does World Health Organization decides about these variants? Why they call only some variants variant of concern? Why they call some variants variant of interest? Why they call some variants variant of under monitoring, so on and so on? Can you answer these questions? You're muted, Dr. Parker. You're muted. Can you please unmute yourself? Dr. Parker, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry about that. Thank you for those questions. Firstly, what COVID-19 has taught us is humility. Whatever we've anticipated and predicted, for example, subsequent waves to be smaller and less intense, has been completely wrong. We've really been caught off guard as to how the pandemic has progressed. So when it comes to your three specific questions, let's start with traveling. Firstly, avoid traveling if you can, if there's a fourth wave in your country. For example, in South Africa, we're entering our fourth wave. We know the numbers in the country, such as Germany, has reached record levels. So if possible, do not travel. But if it's unavoidable, or if there's really pressing needs for it, there are certain measures that can be taken place. And we all know the non-pharmacological measures, which is masking, keeping us a physical distance, sanitizing regularly, and especially the pharmaceutical one, our vaccination. We know that the vaccine is effective. We know that having the whole series of vaccines, even and especially if you need a booster now in the light of new variant, you should be taking your full course. If it means the third booster of a Pfizer vaccine, should be done. South Africa, J&J has been used primarily amongst the healthcare workers. They're also getting boosted. So vaccination is firstly the primary protection that we can do. Secondly, this is obviously we're not going to, if we really have to travel. Secondly, the implementation of non-pharmacological measures that I've just alluded to. Thirdly, if you're going to be traveling, try to travel in your bubble. If it's a family traveling by car, it's not a big issue, but even then, you try to keep the windows open if possible. I know it's winter in the Northern Hemisphere now. Southern Hemisphere, it's a different, completely different issue. If there's going to be gatherings, try to have it outdoors. Easy, again, in Australia and in South Africa, in summer, we don't have much rainy seasons. Our summer season is rainless and beautiful sunshine in Cape Town specifically. So it's relatively easy in certain settings, but not in others. We know the virus loved closed, confined spaces. So good ventilation, if possible, windows open, good spacing in any type of family gathering, for example, and also keeping it short. The other factor that is associated with the festive season, especially in countries such as South Africa, is the consumption of alcohol. Alcohol, like Dr. Bauder already mentioned, Professor Bauder, apologies, already mentioned too, leads to quite a lot of issues, but one of it is to let down your guard. Just give an example. I had one of my patients on last week Friday attended a closed outdoor event, but and only about 100 people were present, but he was quite adamant that some of his colleagues, after consuming alcohol, took off their mask, started embracing each other, started hugging each other. He just turned out positive yesterday after becoming symptomatic a few days ago. I just got his family's results. 3 of them are now positive. So in one family, there's 4 positive cases. We don't know which variant it is, but it's most likely going to be the new variant. So that's the other issue, is avoidance of gatherings. We had a matric in South Africa is when high school children finish their schooling career. They have these gatherings, even though it's outdoors. On the first day, 30 of them turned out to be positive, and about 3 or 4 of the staff members at that event. So the whole event had to be cancelled. Gatherings is really a major issue as far as the spread of COVID-19 is concerned. How do we travel? I mean, I've already mentioned preferably by vehicle, by motor car. I just boarded the international flight, and these stringent measures are beautiful. You are asked to show that you've got a PCR that's negative. You must wear a mask except when you're eating. There's hand sanitizing equipment given all the time. There's inspection by the aircraft staff all the time. But there are other issues that really are overlooked. For example, being transported from your gate to the plane. They actually filled up that bus to the capacity. I mean, people were standing not shoulder to shoulder. It was even literally chin to chin because they tried to get as many people into there. And it took about 15 to 20 minutes to fill that bus. So those type of issues, we actually have to speak to the airport authorities about. Again, to avoid crowded conditions, as I've already mentioned. So that's the safest mode of traveling. Third question about the variants. It is how is it decided as to what's a variant of concern, variant of interest? And I think it's really the WHO's structures as to how they approach it. If there's mild mutations, it's considered variant of interest. If it causes difference in clinical perspective, difference in clinical spread, or any other alterations in how the usual pattern is observed, that would be a variant of put it mildly, or just very, basically that would be a variant of interest. If it, however, causes severe disease, outbreaks, or a rapid rise like we're seeing with Omicron currently in South Africa and worldwide, that would be a variant of concern.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Parker. That helps a lot to understand how WHO defines these variants, as well as, you have explained very well about the precautionary measures need to be taken. Yes, like you said, avoiding the travel during this kind of situation is really the good thing. But in case in emergency, if you have to travel, please take care of all these measures Dr. Parker mentioned. And now, before I get to the give a chance to the participants to ask questions, I think Dr. Wagda has one more point to mention in addition to what Dr. Parker spoke. Dr. Wagda, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Diva. Those points made by Dr. Parker are extremely valuable. But can I just highlight one point? That if you are traveling anywhere, even if there is no travel ban, and if you suddenly experience a lockdown, you are stuck there. And that could mean expensive accommodation. It could mean, unfortunately, if you demise, it means that your family won't be there to say your final rites. And, transportation of mortal remains across continents would be a nightmare, an expensive undertaking. And unless somebody has travel insurance, like going off to Mecca, which is now closed again for pilgrimage, or going off to Varanasi for pilgrimage there, it could be a hazardous undertaking. So my personal opinion is, and I tell this to my friends, stay at your home, contain yourself, don't visit anywhere till this whole thing settles down. And if you really want to meet somebody, go and meet them in the park around the corner.
Yeah. These are very, very valid points, Dr. Wagda. Thank you so much for highlighting all these points. Thank you so much. Now I would like to request the participants to ask any questions you have. Anyone?
Dr. Dewal, I would like to ask one question in the interest of the general public. So each panelist, if you could provide your guidance to the various governments around the world and also the healthcare communities, and if you can probably suggest, since you are treating on the ground and know the reality, to WHO also, whatever way you can contribute so that they can adjust these things. The holidays are coming up, the Christmas, New Year, a lot of people will be meeting and greeting during those holidays. And there's a possibility that a new mutation may evolve out of that as well. So if you can, each one of you take a minute or so and share your thoughts to the world, to the people, to the governments, to healthcare professionals, as well as the various agencies like CDC or WHO, whatever way you can communicate to them. Thank you. You can start, Dr. Jyoti, to start with.
Yeah.
Just wanted to reinforce again a few points. For those of us in America, I think I'll say it again, we do have the luxury. We do have the luxury, and it's actually an embarrassment that we're sitting here, and I thank Lead India for this platform to actually listen directly from Doctors Parker and Vavda about their experience in South Africa. So it's actually, kind of embarrassing to me that we are in such diametrically, different situations. We have the luxury and the opportunities, and we still continue to have Americans refusing vaccination. So I think the biggest plea to central organizations like World Health Organization and the CDC would be to continue to engage and listen to the voice, make scientific and physician voices to be heard. Equitable distribution of vaccines. Rich countries should be able to step up in their ability to distribute these vaccines, make vaccines available. Just as we speak, there's only 4.4 billion in the world who have received one single dose, and only 3.56 billion people across the world who receive both their doses. While 36 countries are rolling out their booster doses, low-income countries have not even been able to offer even one dose for their, patients. So this is a global problem. It's a pandemic, and I just think equitable distribution of vaccine, making our voices heard, continuing to have these dialogues, and is very important. And I thank Lead India again in their efforts to step up and have them. I mean, Omicron was just first learned about on November 24th, and today is December 5th, and we are having this engaging discussion with people directly from, South Africa. So we're very grateful for the knowledge and the information that's being shared to us by South Africa. I do want to commend them on the data that is so beautifully being collected and shared with the world, unlike what we saw with China back in November of 2019. So I'm grateful to our peers in South Africa for doing that. The second thing to the people of America over here is I do want you all to understand that when we keep talking about vaccination, there is a big difference in the immunity that comes from natural infection and vaccination. The immunity that comes as a result of vaccination, even after a past infection, is much more robust. When I say that, I mean there is 4 to 6-fold increase in antibody production after a vaccine, as opposed to just the infection. So please understand that. There is benefits in taking vaccination. Initially, there was a time period that you could afford to wait for about 90 days after you've had COVID-19 infection before you can take a vaccine. With the easy availability of vaccines and with the presence of a variant right now as we speak, if it has been 6 months since your vaccination, or if it has been as early as 2 months after an infection with COVID-19, you are eligible to get vaccination, whether the primary dose or the booster dose. So it's very important to go ahead and take that booster vaccination. The vaccines not only increase, a 6-fold increase of antibodies, but they also create what is called memory cells. So every time the body is presented with a new variant, these memory cells are fired in the body to recognize that there is a foreign, variant that has entered, and they will be able to attack against that variant. So we know that based on immunology. So we are blessed with the mRNA technology, and I think it's very important to recognize what these booster vaccines can do. And hopefully before the end of the year, we should be able to have the 2 drugs that I referred to. So believing in science, reaching out to the ammunition that's available, both vaccination, which is a preventive mechanism, and therapeutics, which is the drugs that are in the pipeline, is the way to go to combat this infection. Thank you.
That's an excellent explanation, Dr. Julie. Thank you so very much. And Dr. Parker, do you have any comments on Dr. Hari's question? Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'll do so. Yeah, thank you for that excellent overview. I can only echo what Dr. Previous colleague just said. Contrary to what is often believed, South Africa actually has 42% of the eligible population already having received one dose already. Our problem is not a supply, contrary to the rest of Africa, which has only this year vaccinated 6% of the population. South Africa's got the supplies. Our major obstacle at the moment is vaccine hesitancy and vaccine misinformation. We are struggling with that. We do, however, we have government support for that. Firstly, we do have, thank God, the backing of most of the large religious organizations. So we use the pulpit, we use the mimbar, we use the temples to actually spread the message as well. And we are lucky in that a number of our most esteemed colleagues at the forefront of the fight against COVID-19 actually are members of, for example, a Jewish organization, religious organization, or Muslim organization, Hindu one, Christian one. So we are utilizing all those platforms to spread the message, to answer the concerns, because a lot of it is not so much being anti-vax. It is more a fear-induced hesitancy. So it takes time, unfortunately, but the reality is we have to use time. We have to sit down on an individual basis, often in groups, but we have to use more than the current modalities to actually convince the hesitant ones to take the vaccine, because larger the unvaccinated population, the more the chances for new variants and new mutants to actually evolve. And this is one way we have to go ahead at the moment.
Very, very, very well. Valid points you pointed. Sad to hear that the vaccine hesitancy and vaccine misinformation is being circulated largely, which is causing the vaccination process a big hurdle. So very well explained. Thank you so much, Dr. Parker, for your answer. Now I would like to hear from Dr. Manuel.
I want to give a message of hope because at this moment we have the best science and healthcare resources of ever, so this will help. A call for cooperation between communities to make differences in opportunities as smaller as possible, because not everybody has the same possibilities to prevent, to diagnose, and to cure. And in third term, I want to advise people. We all are fighting against this pandemic. So we should be wise on the following recommendations to prevent these transmissions. And perhaps this is the most important point. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Manuel. So before we go ahead to the next
I'd like to just make one statement as an answer to what Dr. Parker brought up. I'm glad to hear that vaccine availability is not the issue in South Africa, but vaccine refusal. That hasn't been easy. And as I said, it frustrates us over here far more in America, where the vaccine is so easily available. One of the things that tends to work is to always take the time, as you pointed out, with your patients, to not say, do this, but to say, why aren't you able to? What is your concern in not receiving the vaccination? And a fact that I tend to share, and I have been able to successfully, convert a non-vaxxer to a vacciner to taking the vaccine is, I tell them a simple fact. There's a 1.7% chance of dying from COVID. There's a 3.5% chance of getting severely affected with COVID and being hospitalized. And there is a 0.001% chance of getting a serious adverse effect from vaccination. The math is clear. 3.5% chance of coming down with a severe illness, 1.7% chance risk of death if you get the infection, and a 0.001% chance of getting a serious side effect to the vaccine. So the choice is yours. And I try to remind them, nothing in life is zero risk. Nothing in life is zero risk.
Exactly.
I need them to come with the math. And I don't force them to take the vaccine. I respect their decision, but I say, as their physician, it is my job to recommend it. And I'd like to understand what are the concerns. I give them the facts and I let them know I'm available. If you have questions, feel free to come back and we can talk this over. I've had about 3 out of 5 patients leave the office after taking the vaccine. So it's a frustrating and a Herculean task that we have. But I think we are in this profession for a reason, improving health outcomes for everybody, irrespective of what their choices are, irrespective of their poor judgments. We will continue to do everything, right, to improve health outcomes. So I wish all of you the best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jyoti. Very well explained. Those are really valid points. Yes. I mean, it frustrates sometimes, but we have to do what we have to do. So thank you so much for your answer. Before we move on to the next, there is one question on the chat window that I would like to address, which is there any special vaccinations needed? Covishield or Covaxin is enough? I think it's from India. I try to address this question, and then we will move on to the next question of session. The vaccine, there is no special vaccination is needed because the current vaccines are perfectly all right for the Omicron variant or any other variants as of now today. So whatever the vaccine we have available, either Covishield or Covaxin or mRNA vaccines or adenoviral vector vaccines or any other type of vaccine, all are working perfectly fine against each and every variant. The variants are not yet, from the speakers already, they have explained that the variants are not yet escaped the immunity. So getting the vaccination is what protects you. Whatever the earliest and nearest vaccine that is available to you, go and get it according to the physician's recommendations and scientists' recommendations, so that you can protect yourself and follow the non-pharmaceutical interventions, as Dr. Parker mentioned, that maintaining the social distancing and using the mask, using the sanitization, avoiding the social gatherings. In case you don't, it's not easy. From past 2 years, we keep on saying avoid. But what I was trying to say nowadays is, you can manage the social gatherings like Dr. Jyoti managed. Take your mask with you. Go to a gathering, take your mask with you. Make sure you protected yourself and make sure you sanitize your hands so that you come out of the gathering without an infection or without any kind of illness. So these are the measures. So vaccines are today's session. In the today's session, what the take-home message is, the variant of concern, which is Omicron, it is a concern still, but it's not scary. So it doesn't mean that you don't have to worry, but it doesn't mean that you really have to be worried. So you take as long as you take the precautions, like the non-pharmaceutical interventions, and then right now we have not only the multiple vaccines, 8 different types of vaccines are authorized all over the world. We have, compared to the previous, before the Delta variant or the Beta variant, to fight with this Omicron variant. We also have, Dr. Jyoti mentioned that 2 additional therapeutics are in the pipeline. One is already authorized in UK, and also today or tomorrow it's going to be authorized in the US, which is Molnupiravir. This is an oral pill. It has an advantage compared to the remdesivir, because remdesivir was an injection. To get the remdesivir, you had to go to the hospital. But Molnupiravir is an oral pill. You don't have to go to the hospital. You can take it wherever you are at your home. This is an advantage. Now, the third medicine, which is Paxlovid, Dr. Jyoti mentioned, that's also an oral medication. We have multiple weapons getting ready to fight with this pandemic, and we are hoping that with the help of the people, by following the vaccination procedures and by following the non-pharmaceutical and pharmaceutical interventions, we can overcome this pandemic as early as possible. So please follow the pharmaceutical interventions and non-pharmaceutical interventions. This is the take-home message from today's session. Now, if there is no more questions, I would like to hand it to Dr. Ram Maruri to mention the word of thanks.
So I just want to read one question. Compared to the previous versions of the COVID-19 virus, what are the specific symptoms, physical changes specific to this Omicron? If any of you can answer that, if you know of something different compared to the previous version of the virus.
Dr. Jyoti or Dr. Parker, any of you?
Okay, but from my colleagues who've experienced quite a number of these patients, in fact, one of my colleagues about a week ago had about 50 new cases in his practice. The hallmark seems to be muscular pains and body aches, also high fever, sore throat, and a bit of cough. The characteristic ones of altered smell or lack of smell, anosmia, or dysgeusia, which is an alteration of the taste, is not that often picked up, but it is still prevalent. Now, we do have a co-circulation of Delta as well as Omicron at the moment. So it could be that people are seeing certain cases of Delta still, giving rise to the case of symptoms of anosmia, for example. And it tends to be younger people. By younger, we mean under the age of 40 years old. yes, there has been a higher percentage of younger, and especially those under the age of 9, who were admitted to hospital. But because the numbers were initially so low, it appears to have been more as a precautionary basis, because the children under 9 had high fevers. They were admitted just for observation, and they were discharged a couple of days later without even needing oxygen or so forth. But these, again, as I've said, are early indications. It doesn't mean it's going to manifest as hallmarks of this particular variant.
Right.
So
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Parker.
Yeah.
So Dr. Sabita, do you want to ask any questions, Dr. Sabita, you wanted to do before?
It was answered. Thank you very much, Dr. Harry. I just want to, before we move to Mr. Ram, I just wanted to say, you guys, the team together has put together some amazing information. It certainly gives me a sense of relief in terms of the doubts I've had based on just, the word on the ground and the initial scare. So I feel a lot more comfortable. Thank you so much. I'd like to pass to Dr. Ram now.
Dr. Jyoti, you wanted to say something?
Right. I just wanted to add that in addition to what Dr. Parker said, our understanding is, again, we need more time to get a better understanding. But from what we know, headache, fever, and body ache seems to be the prominent symptom. Having said that, the Delta variant is still very much around. That causes more of respiratory symptoms similar to a common cold. So anybody with fever, a common cold-like symptoms, severe headache, which cannot be explained, and body aches, is recommended to please go and get tested. With the winter fast approaching here in the US, it's important to even take a step forward and purchase some home rapid testing kits. They're easily available. And hopefully the government is promising that insurances should soon be able to provide us with free in-home testing kits. So these are some of the resources that we can have handy. It's a simple test. The minute you know you're positive, you can quarantine yourself. You can stop attending that family gathering that you were planning to attend and thereby limit the transmission.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jyoti. So Dr. Ram is the Secretary General for our sister organization in India called Liberty Foundation. The Liberty Foundation, again, is a thought process of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam to transform the young minds into responsible citizens and enable them to pursue their passion so that they can become Bharat Ratnas, which is the highest civilian honor India gives for all the accomplished people. Everybody need not become the President of India, but they can excel in their particular passion that they want to do in life. So the Liberty Foundation is an acronym for Lead India Bharat Ratnas Education and Research for Transforming Youth. And we are in the process of setting up the Liberty Schools in India, and Dr. Ram is leading that effort from Hyderabad in India. And we requested him to do some closing remarks and also do the vote of thanks on behalf of the Lead India and the Liberty Foundation. Before he comes in and says something, I would like to thank each one of you for sharing this valuable information to avoid the crisis in a very structured fashion, and you are able to communicate very clearly to the people who are listening on this channel, and it's a very timely and apt, and sharing your especially the South African experiences means a lot. And Dr. Jyoti's contribution from the US side is wonderful, and you highlighted what the responsibility of the US in general, not taking the vaccines when they are available, and also not able to use them for other countries who are in desperate need. I think you highlighted that very well, ma'am. And Professor Manuel, from a clinical point of view, as a professor, you shared your thoughts on this particular thing. We really appreciate it for joining us. And Dr. Parker and Dr. Hussain bringing us the live data from South Africa help definitely for the people who are watching this show. And again, Dr. Mahendra Dewal, who has been our advisor for a long time, and whenever we needed him, he jumped in, and is a scientist with a lot of information on the vaccines in general and COVID-related vaccines in particular. Thank you so much, Dr. Dewal, for doing this. Now with this, I would like to thank Sabita also for hosting this session. And we've been doing this, and most likely we'll repeat some of these things in the next few weeks, because until this holidays, we need to educate people to not to get panic and also take proper precautions to be safe during their travels and gatherings. Thank you so much once again, everybody. Dr. Ram, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hari, and the team, Lead India, and whoever attended, the participants on the Zoom, and also through the YouTube channels. Many people are watching. And we thank all of you once again, and especially the panel, the keynote speakers. You have given a lot of hope to all of us today, and also many people around the world. Thank you very much once again. And just to summarize, now we now our host,
Dr. Ram, Dr. Hussain came. Can you showcase, spotlight him as well? If
yeah.
you can. Thank you.
So
and add Sabita also if she's available. Thank you.
Yeah, she's. So yeah, Dr. Sabita, you hosted another great and wonderful session. Thank you very much. And likewise, Narsimha, you did wonderful job, and Zoom hosting and playing great videos to the viewers. And then, as always, Mahenderji, he ran the panel discussion, very nice way, and all the keynote speakers, including Dr. Hari. Again, we get a lot of hope and inspiration from you, leading us to very quality webinars and sessions. This is so nice of taking our Chief Mentor of the Lead India Foundation, Dr. Kalamji's vision with your great direction. We are taking it forward very happily. And Professor Dr. Manuel Senior in Europe, you are giving us a message of hope, and you mentioned about whatever happened in the past about the Spanish flu, war days, and also now this pandemic is, giving that kind of situation to combat like war days. And Mukherjee from India, he cautioned, the virus is being infected to the children, basically, which was never, in the past, but now it is more about 10% of the children are being infected with this virus. So though the virus is milder, 70% milder, but we should not take it easy. And this is basically, this is early stage of the virus, and it may be mutated also. That is the caution given by Dr. Mukherjee. Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee. And again, the great speaker from USA, Jyoti, the origin and how the virus get protection inside our body, and how it impacts. And again, the infected people are those who are not really vaccinated or partly vaccinated, but those already got vaccinated are really not getting many problems with this virus. Thank you, Dr. Jyoti, for giving this great knowledge and giving a hope to us that vaccination is working very well across the globe. Dr. Hussain from Africa, you mentioned that 16,000 cases as of now in Africa. I think it is increasing day by day. Hopefully, it won't cause any, death, and it will be definitely curable. We pray that all of us pray, the world prays for South Africa, and I think you will be not in the danger. And more education is required. That's what you uttered. And the virus is also impacting the animals which are dying in the seas and all that. And also in the country like Africa, there is also an issue because of this COVID and pandemic. Poverty and unemployment is rising. So we need to definitely take care of this issue also. And good part is alcohol was banned and accidents got decreased. We are very happy to this know from you. And you definitely wanted to exchange these ideas, what we had today, and corroborate so that, all the support is required across the globe among each other. This is very much needed. Thank you very much, Dr. Hussain, for your nice message. And Dr. Salim Parker, about the travel, no travel history, but people get infected with the virus. So we cannot, say this is how the virus is being infected. So many ways, especially the immunity is playing a major role. That's what the world says. And travel is better to be avoided as much as possible. That's what Dr. Salim Parker advised. And primary protection definitely is going to be the vaccination. Thank you, Salim Parker, Dr. Salim Parker. This is a wonderful message and hope you have given us today. And also the symptoms mentioned by Jyoti was very, very shortly told that headache, then so small fever, and unbearable headache. That is what unusual headache, and then cold. These kind of things we definitely need to consider and get the tested. The virus is tested so that we are safe. So I don't want to take much time. And once again, I thank every one of you here, including the audience and viewers in the YouTube channel. Thank you very much, all of you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ram, and sincerely request Dr. Dewal and Sabita to continue to host these sessions to educate people to be safe as much as possible. I think don't need to worry based on all the information provided here, but as long as you follow the COVID guidelines, and we should be fine to face this variant as well. So Dr. Dewal, you can conclude the session with any closing remarks. Thank you.
Dr. Dewal, you're on mute.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, Dr. Hari, as you said, we will continue hosting these sessions until we come over with this pandemic. So we will give hope, we'll give confidence, trust to the people all over the world. And again, the Omicron variant is a still concerning variant. It's not a scary variant. So be safe, stay safe, follow the guidelines mentioned by all the experts over here, and stay safe. Thank you so much for being here. And I have a special thanks to all our eminent speakers, panelists over here, Dr. Jyoti, Dr. Parker, Dr. Manuel, and Dr. Hussain. Thank you. Thank you so much, and as well as Dr. Mukherjee. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you all, and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going, I'm stopping live.
Namaskar friends, and welcome to the press briefing by the Health Ministry, which has been there after a long time. To brief us more on the latest issues related with COVID, we have with us Dr. V.K. Paulji from Niti Aayog, DG ICMR, Dr. Balram Bhargavji, Dr. S.K. Singh, Director NCDC, Joint Secretary Ministry of Health, Shri Love Agarwal. My welcome to all. First, there will be a presentation by Shri Love Agarwal, followed by remarks by Dr. Bhargav and later by Dr. Paul. After that, we'll take a few questions. Over to Shri Love Agarwal.
गुड इवनिंग फ्रेंड्स, हम आपको कोविड-19 की वर्तमान परिस्थिति के बारे में बताना चाहेंगे। जैसे कि हम इस स्लाइड में देखते हैं तो हम पाते हैं कि देश में आज 99,763 टोटल केसेस एक्टिव केसेस की श्रृंखला में आते हैं, यानी कि यह वो केसेस है जो कि होम आइसोलेशन में है या हमारी मेडिकल सेटअप के द्वारा उनको मॉनिटर किया जा रहा है। ऑन एन एवरेज हमारे देश में पिछले एक हफ्ते से 8,800 के करीब केसेस प्रति रोज देश में नोट किए जा रहे हैं। ओवरऑल लास्ट वीक की अगर हम केस पॉजिटिविटी देखें तो पाते हैं वह घटते घटते अराउंड 0.89% के करीब है। अगर हम पिछले 24 घंटे का डेटा एनालाइज करें तो पाते हैं कि देश में 9,765 केसेस नोट किए गए हैं और पिछले एक महीने में कंसिस्टेंटली इस नंबर में एक बहुत अधिक तो नहीं लेकिन कमी नोट की गई है, जहां 11,000 केसेस हमारे 1 नवंबर को नोट हुए थे, अब वह संख्या घटकर 9,765 के करीब रह गई है। इस सिचुएशन में अगर हम इसको फर्दर डेटा को एनालाइज करें तो जैसे इससे पहले भी नोट किया गया है कि इतने बड़े देश में केस की ट्रेजेक्ट्री का जो स्वरूप है वह डिफरेंट प्रांतों में डिफरेंट तरीके से पाया गया है। तो उस समय में देखें तो अगर हम देखें स्टेट में जो एक्टिव केसेस आज हैं तो 10,000 से अधिक एक्टिव केसेस वाली हमारे देश में 2 स्टेट हैं, वह केरला और महाराष्ट्र हैं, जिसमें 44,000 केसेस एक्टिव केसेस की श्रृंखला में हमारे केरला में है और महाराष्ट्र से 11,000 केसेस हैं। यानी कि यह 2 स्टेट ही हम एनालाइज करें तो पाते हैं करीब 55% केसेस जो देश के एक्टिव केसेस है वह इन 2 स्टेट से आते हैं। उसके साथ ही 9 स्टेट ऐसी हैं जहां पर कि 1,000 से अधिक और 10,000 से कम एक्टिव केसेस हैं और जिसमें भी मुख्यतः तमिलनाडु, वेस्ट बंगाल और कर्नाटक में अधिक संख्या में एक्टिव केसेस पाए जा रहे हैं। इसके साथ ही हम देखते हैं कि अगर हम देश की केस पॉजिटिविटी जो कि एक पीक के समय में 20% के करीब नोट की गई थी, वह धीरे धीरे घटते हुए अब पिछले 2 माह से 2% से भी कम है और अगर हम इस हफ्ते का देखें तो वह 0.9% के करीब है। लेकिन जैसे इससे पहले भी हमने आपसे कहा है कि जहां एक स्थाई पर देश में 0.9% ओवरऑल केस पॉजिटिविटी है, फिर भी इन्फेक्शन के स्प्रेड को देखते हुए उसको समझने के लिए उसको अगर हम देखें तो डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल पर अभी भी कुछ डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स और कुछ स्टेट्स हमारे लिए कॉज ऑफ कंसर्न बने हुए हैं और जिसके लिए हम उन स्टेट और डिस्ट्रिक्ट से बात करते रहते हैं, जिसमें मुख्यतः अगर हम देखें कि 18 जिले आज भी देश में ऐसे हैं जहां पर कि वीकली पॉजिटिविटी 5 से 10% के बीच में है, जिसमें मुख्यतः केरला के 9 जिले हैं, अरुणाचल प्रदेश, असम, हिमाचल, लद्दाख, मणिपुर, पुडुचेरी, सिक्किम, उत्तर प्रदेश और वेस्ट बंगाल से एक जिले हैं जहां पर कि 5 से 10% के बीच में केस पॉजिटिविटी नोट की जा रही है। इससे भी अधिक संख्या में अगर हम देखें ऐसे भी कुछ जिले हैं, 15 जिले देश में, जहां पर कि केस पॉजिटिविटी यानी कि इन्फेक्शन का स्प्रेड 10% से भी ज़्यादा है और जिसमें मुख्यतः मिजोरम जहां के करीब 9 जिले हैं, केरला 4 जिले हैं और अरुणाचल प्रदेश, यह ऐसी 3 स्टेट हैं जहां पर कि अभी भी 10% से अधिक कुछ जिलों में हमने केस पॉजिटिविटी को नोट किया है। हम इन स्टेट से डिस्कस करते रहते हैं। हमारा एफर्ट है कि हम टेस्टिंग की संख्या बढ़ाएं और इन्फेक्शन को जल्दी से जल्दी पकड़ सकें ताकि हम कॉन्टैक्ट ट्रेसिंग के द्वारा उस पर्टिकुलर इन्फेक्शन को कंट्रोल को वहीं पर रोक सकें। इसी के साथ ही हम आपको अवगत करना चाहेंगे, देश ने कोविड के वैक्सीनेशन कवरेज में नए आयाम स्थापित किए हैं। आप सबको अवगत है कि हमने कुछ ही समय पहले 100 करोड़ डोजेज एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन देश में किया था और अब वह संख्या बढ़ते बढ़ते अगर हम देखें तो 125 करोड़ से अधिक देश में अभी तक हम डोजेज डिस्ट्रीब्यूट कर चुके हैं, एडमिनिस्टर कर चुके हैं, जिसमें मुख्यतः फर्स्ट डोज में 79.16 करोड़ डोजेज कवर हुई हैं, जिसके द्वारा देश की 84.3% एडल्ट पॉपुलेशन को हम फर्स्ट डोज कवरेज में कवर कर चुके हैं। इसी के साथ ही सेकेंड डोज कवरेज के अंतर्गत 45.92 करोड़ डोजेज देते हुए हमने देश की 49% ऑफ द एडल्ट पॉपुलेशन को फुल वैक्सीनेशन कवरेज के द्वारा कवर करने का आयाम स्थापित किया है। इसके लिए मुख्यतः एफर्ट्स हमारे रिसर्चर्स, हमारी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग फैसिलिटीज़, हमारी स्टेट्स में काम करने वाला हर वह कर्मचारी जिसने इस काम को कंट्रीब्यूट करने में पिछले ऑलमोस्ट 1 साल से अपने कंटिन्यूस एफर्ट्स के द्वारा यह पर्टिकुलर उपलब्धि हासिल की है। इसी के साथ ही हम आपको बताना चाहेंगे, जहां हमने शुरू में जनवरी माह में अपनी वैक्सीनेशन को स्टार्ट किया था, वह धीरे धीरे बढ़ते हुए जहां मई के माह में हम लोग अराउंड 19 लाख डोजेज प्रति रोज कर रहे थे, वह बढ़ते बढ़ते अब हम नवंबर के माह में हमने 59.32 लाख डोजेज प्रति रोज के स्तर से हमने कार्य कर डोजेज एडमिनिस्टर देश में की हैं और पिछले माह में ही 17.29 करोड़ डोजेज देश में एडमिनिस्टर हुई हैं। इसी के साथ ही एक और एफर्ट देश में किया गया जब यह देखा गया कि अभी भी कुछ प्रांत ऐसे हैं जहां पर फर्स्ट डोज कवरेज को बढ़ाने की आवश्यकता है और साथ ही कुछ ऐसे लोग हैं जिनको फर्स्ट डोज लग चुकी है लेकिन जिनको सेकंड डोज दी हुई है और उनको कवर करना है। तो देश में माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के आदेशानुसार उनके आह्वान के चलते हुए हमने घर घर दस्तक एक टीकाकरण अभियान देश में स्टेट के साथ मिलकर शुरू किया, जिसके अंतर्गत हमारा मुख्य प्रयत्न अवेयरनेस क्रिएशन, मोबिलाइजेशन ऑफ पीपल और साथ में इंश्योर करना कि उनको जो फर्स्ट डोज के ड्यू हैं उनको हम एलिजिबल लोगों को फर्स्ट डोज दें, और जो सेकंड डोज जिनको ड्यू है उनको सेकंड डोज देते हुए, और यह कार्य भी जो हमारे फील्ड कर्मचारी हैं उन्होंने घर घर जाकर उसको कार्य को किया है। इसी के अंतर्गत इसी एफर्ट्स के चलते हमने देखा है कि पिछले एक माह में देश में फर्स्ट डोज का कवरेज करीब 5.9% के करीब बढ़ा है, जिसमें कि जैसे अगर हम इंडिया में देखें जहां वह 78.1% था, वह 5.9% हमने उसको ओवरऑल देश में बढ़ते देखा। इसी तरह उत्तर प्रदेश में फर्स्ट डोज कवरेज का इंक्रीज 8.7% नोट किया गया, वेस्ट बंगाल में 7.7, छत्तीसगढ़ में 7.7% नोट किया गया, तेलंगाना में 7.5% ग्रोथ इन द फर्स्ट डोज कवरेज नोट की गई है, महाराष्ट्र में 6.8 और तमिलनाडु में 6.8% फर्स्ट डोज कवरेज में वृद्धि नोट की गई है। साथ ही इस कार्यक्रम के चलते हमने ओवरऑल देश में 11.7% सेकेंड डोज कवरेज में भी इंक्रीज नोट किया है, जिसमें मुख्यतः 28.7% इंक्रीज इन हिमाचल प्रदेश, मध्य प्रदेश में 25.1% इंक्रीज नोट किया गया, अंडमान निकोबार आइलैंड में 18.5%, जम्मू कश्मीर में 17.6%, गुजरात में 16.9%, और इसी तरह हर स्टेट में कंटिन्यूस बेसिस पर एफर्ट किए गए। इसके द्वारा हमने फर्स्ट डोज और सेकेंड डोज कवरेज को अपने देश में बढ़ाने का कार्य किया। इसके संबंध में जब फील्ड में यह कार्य हुआ तो हर स्टेट में कुछ बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस, कुछ ऐसे एफर्ट्स किए गए जिसके द्वारा कि हम अपने वैक्सीनेशन के इस कार्यक्रम को बढ़ा सकें। जिस तरह बिहार में एक अधूरा दो से पूरा एक कैंपेन लॉन्च की गई, टीका एक्सप्रेस या टीका वाली नाव, और विमेन डे में इससे संबंधित कैंपेन, योगा डे में इससे संबंधित कैंपेन। इसी तरह से रिफ्यूजल रेस्पॉन्स टीम, यानी कि जहां पर किसी कारणवश एक हेजिटेंसी थी उनको ओरिएंट करना, मोटर बाइक रिलेटेड वैक्सीनेशन टीम, और साथ ही स्कूल लेवल पर अवेयरनेस जैसे कार्य किए गए। हिमाचल प्रदेश में एक कैंपेन ली गई जिसका नाम दिया गया सुरक्षा के रंग ना होंगे फीके जब समय पर लगेंगे 2 टीके। हरियाणा में इसी तरह बुलावा टोली के द्वारा वैक्सीनेशन टीम के साथ एक विलेज लेवल टीम भी गई जिसने लोगों को मोबिलाइज किया। महाराष्ट्र में इसी तरह कमेटी ऑफ सरपंचेज और जो फील्ड वर्कर्स थे उन्होंने मोबिलाइजेशन का कार्य किया। मणिपुर में रिलीजियस लीडर्स ने सहयोग दिया, और साथ ही बाजार हाट में, मार्केट प्लेसेस में और गवर्नमेंट ऑफिसेज में भी इससे संबंधित स्पेसिफिक ड्राइव ली गई। साथ ही जो टीम अच्छा कार्य कर रही थी उनको प्रोत्साहन देते हुए डिस्ट्रिक्ट सिविल सर्जन ने उनको अवार्ड्स भी दिए। आंध्र प्रदेश में इसी तरह कला जाथा और डंडोरा के द्वारा इसकी पब्लिसिटी की गई। झारखंड में नुक्कड़ नाटक और रैंप और वॉल राइटिंग के द्वारा इस कार्यक्रम को बढ़ाया गया। इसी को अगर हम देखें तो हम देखते हैं कि देश के हर कोने कोने में इस पर कार्य किया गया। जैसे कि कुछ फोटोग्राफ्स हम आपको दिखा रहे हैं। मेहसाना गुजरात में, खेल घड़ी टोला में देवराजनगर में, नाहरगढ़ इन राजस्थान, छत्तीसगढ़, दिल्ली और बिहार। इसी तरह देश के हर प्रांत में इस ड्राइव को एक बहुत ही चित्त शुद्धि से, एक बहुत ही हृदयपूर्वक इसके ऊपर कार्य करते हुए इसको बढ़ाया जा रहा है। साथ ही जब एक स्थाई पर हम टीका कार्यक्रम में आगे बढ़ रहे हैं, हम आपके सामने ग्लोबल सिनेरियो भी प्रस्तुत करना चाहेंगे। इसमें हम आपके सामने सबमिट करना चाहेंगे कि अभी भी ओवरऑल बेसिस पर देश में, दुनिया में सर्ज इन केसेस नोट किया जा रहा है, और जिसमें कि मुख्यतः यूरोप में पिछले एक हफ्ते के अगर केसेस देखे जाएं दुनिया के, तो 70% केसेस यूरोप से आए हैं। अगर वीक एंडिंग 28 को देखें तो करीब 2.75 लाख नए केसेस यूरोप में आए हैं, और 29,000 से अधिक डेथ्स पिछले एक हफ्ते में यूरोपियन रीजन में नोट की गई हैं। और उसी के कंपैरिजन में साउथ ईस्ट एशिया रीजन, यानी कि वह प्रांत जिसमें कि इंडिया भी है और ऐसे 11 देश आते हैं, तो वहाँ पर करीब पिछले एक हफ्ते में केवल 1.2 लाख केसेस आए हैं, जो कि पूरे दुनिया के 3.1% केसेस ही हैं। तो हम देखें कि एक स्थाई पर अभी हमारे यहाँ साउथ ईस्ट एशिया रीजन में केसेस में एक कमी नोट की जा रही है। दूसरे स्थाई पर एक इक्वल चैलेंज के रूप में यहाँ हम देखते हैं कि यूरोप में करीब दुनिया के 70% केसेस आ रहे हैं। WHO ने इस सिचुएशन को एनालाइज भी किया, और वह एनालिसिस हम आप लोगों के सामने लाना चाहेंगे। जैसे कि WHO ने बताया कि पब्लिक हेल्थ मेजर्स, यानी कि जिस विषय में हम कंटिन्यूस बेसिस पर बात करते रहे हैं, विच इज यूज ऑफ मास्क, फिजिकल डिस्टेंसिंग, हैंड एंड रेस्पिरेटरी हाइजीन, तो उसके बारे में WHO ने कहा है कि लैक्सिटी इन पब्लिक हेल्थ मेजर्स एक मुख्य कारण है कि जो हमने यूरोप में इन केसेस में बढ़ोतरी नोट की है। अगर आप देखें तो पाएंगे कि जर्मनी में केसेस एक बहुत अधिक तेजी से बढ़ रहे हैं और ऑन ए डेली बेसिस में करीब 75,000 के करीब केसेस भी आ रहे हैं। यूनाइटेड किंगडम्स में मल्टीपल सर्जेज नोट की गई हैं और करीब 47,000 केसेस अभी आ रहे हैं। फ्रांस में केसेस में एक बढ़ोतरी नोट की जा रही है और बेल्जियम में भी केसेस में एक अधिक संख्या में नोट किए जा रहे हैं, जिसके बारे में मुख्यतः हम ये बताना चाहेंगे कि पिछले 2 महीनों में ही कोविड केसेस और डेथ्स यूरोप में ऑलमोस्ट डबल हुई हैं और जिसका कारण WHO ने एनालिसिस कर जो बताया है वह यह है कि रिलैक्सेशन ऑफ पब्लिक हेल्थ एंड सोशल मेजर्स, यानी कि यूज ऑफ मास्क, फिजिकल डिस्टेंसिंग एंड हैंड एंड रेस्पिरेटरी हाइजीन। साथ ही जब ये रिलैक्सेशन लाए गए और केसेस में बढ़ोतरी नोट भी की गई, तब यह पाया गया कि उसके बाद जब फिर से मेजर्स को इनको इंट्रोड्यूस किया गया तो या तो वह स्लो इंट्रोड्यूस किए गए या जिस लेवल का इम्पैक्ट होना चाहिए, जिस लेवल की दृढ़ता होनी चाहिए, उस लेवल से उस पर कार्य नहीं किया गया, जिसके कारण भी वहां पर केसेस में कमी नहीं पाई जा रही है। इसके साथ ही तीसरा मुख्य अंश जो WHO ने बताया है वह यह है कि लो वैक्सीनेशन कवरेज कुछ देशों में और स्पेशली वहां पर जो कि वल्नरेबल पॉपुलेशन है उसका कवरेज न होना भी एक हाई डेथ रेट का कारण है। हम आपके सामने यह डेटा इसलिए लाना चाहते हैं कि हम यह बताना चाहते हैं कि पिछले ऑलमोस्ट 2 साल की इस सतत लड़ाई में हमारे सामने कुछ लर्निंग्स हैं। वह यह है कि जब भी हम देखते हैं कि केसेस कम होते हैं तो कुछ लेवल ऑफ रिलैक्सेशन कम्युनिटी लेवल पर भी हम महसूस करते हैं। जरूरी यह है कि इस चैलेंज को कंटिन्यूस बेसिस पे समझते हुए इसमें कोई भी रिलैक्सेशन हमारे लिए हानिकारक हो सकती है, यह हम आपके सामने सबमिट करना चाहते हैं। इसी संबंध में एक और नया चैलेंज कुछ हद तक हमारे लोगों के सामने आया है, जिसके बारे में हम आपको बताना चाहेंगे। एक नया वेरिएंट ऑफ कंसर्न ओमिक्रॉन, जिसका टेक्निकल नेम है B1.1.529, यह दुनिया में नोट किया गया है। इसके विषय में कुछ फैक्ट्स हम आप लोगों के सामने लाना चाहेंगे। उसके बारे में बताने से पहले हम WHO का वह फ्रेमवर्क जिसके द्वारा कोई भी वेरिएंट नोट किया जाता है आपके सामने रखना चाहते हैं। WHO ने बताया है कि कोई भी म्यूटेशन को वह 3 तरीके से एनालाइज करते हैं। एक होता है वेरिएंट्स अंडर मॉनिटरिंग, दूसरा होता है वेरिएंट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट और तीसरा और सबसे अधिकतम श्रेणी में रखा जाने वाला वेरिएंट ऑफ कंसर्न। तो वेरिएंट अंडर मॉनिटरिंग हम किसको कहते हैं? वह म्यूटेशन जो कि किसी वायरस में पाई जाए जिससे एक सस्पेक्ट है कि वह फ्यूचर एक रिस्क हो सकती है और उसके लिए और एविडेंस की जरूरत है कि उससे क्या हमारा पब्लिक हेल्थ मेजर्स इंपैक्ट होते हैं, क्या हमारे को कुछ और अधिक कार्य करने की जरूरत है, तो उसको हम वेरिएंट अंडर मॉनिटरिंग के रूप में लेते हैं। उसके बाद ही वेरिएंट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट, यानी कि उससे अधिक श्रेणी में अगर कोई म्यूटेशन पाई जाती है तो उसको वेरिएंट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट के रूप में बताया जाता है। वेरिएंट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट वह म्यूटेशन है जिससे कि ये प्रिडिक्शन हो सकती है कि वो वायरस के कैरेक्टरिस्टिक, जैसे कि वायरस का ट्रांसमिशन, वायरस के द्वारा की जाने वाली बीमारी की सीवियरिटी या वायरस के द्वारा इम्यून एस्केप और डायग्नोस्टिक, जो हमारे डायग्नोस्टिक किट्स हैं या हमारी दवाइयां हैं, वह उस पर विफल हो जाएं। अगर ऐसा प्रिडिक्शन या सस्पेक्ट हो अगर, तो उस पर्टिकुलर केस को वेरिएंट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट के रूप में बताया जाता है। और ऐसे केसेस जो कि सिग्निफिकेंट ट्रांसमिसिबिलिटी और कम्युनिटी ट्रांसमिशन को बढ़ावा दे सकते हैं, जो मल्टीपल कंट्रीज में मल्टीपल क्लस्टर्स के रूप में हमारे सामने आ सकते हैं और जिससे ओवरऑल एक ग्लोबल पब्लिक हेल्थ को खतरा हो सकता है, उनको वेरिएंट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट में बताया जाता है। उन वेरिएंट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट यानी कि सबसे अधिकतम श्रेणी में रखे जाने वाले म्यूटेशन, उन वेरिएंट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट को जिससे कि प्रिडिक्शन के अलावा भी एक डेमोन्स्ट्रेटिव इंपैक्ट भी दिखता है कि यह जो इसमें चेंजेस आए हैं म्यूटेशन में, इससे या तो ट्रांसमिसिबिलिटी बढ़ती है या पब्लिक हेल्थ मेजर जो हम ले सकते हैं उनका इम्पैक्ट जो है उसका नहीं होगा, उसकी जो डिजीज़ की सीवियरिटी बढ़ सकती है। जिस तरीके से वह पर्टिकुलर वेरिएंट अगर हमारी बॉडी में इन्फेक्ट करता है तो जो डिजीज़ की सीवियरिटी या क्लिनिकल डिजीज़ की प्रेजेंटेशन है वह और सीवियर रूप में हमारे सामने आ सकती है, या हमारे डायग्नोस्टिक्स हैं, वैक्सीन्स हैं, थेरेप्यूटिक्स हैं, वो इम्पैक्ट हो सकते हैं। तो अगर ऐसा कोई एक फीडबैक होता है या कोई अंडरस्टैंडिंग होती है तो उसके बारे में उसको वेरिएंट ऑफ कंसर्न के रूप में बताया जाता है। तो इसी अगर एक फ्रेमवर्क को समझते हुए अब हम आप लोगों के सामने बताना चाहेंगे कि यह ओमिक्रॉन वेरिएंट जो कि दुनिया में नोट किया गया, यह पहले 24 नवंबर को 2 देशों में मुख्यतः, जिसमें कि सबसे पहला केस WHO को रिपोर्ट किया गया साउथ अफ्रीका के गुटांग प्रोविंस से, और दूसरा केस रिपोर्ट किया गया बोत्सवाना से। और जब यह केस रिपोर्ट किया गया WHO को, तो WHO ने इस पूरे डिटेल को एनालाइज किया, और एनालाइज करने के बाद इसको 2 दिन बाद ही यानी कि 26 नवंबर को वेरिएंट ऑफ कंसर्न के रूप में इसको डिक्लेयर किया। और उसके साथ ही हम देख रहे हैं कि ऑन ए डेली बेसिस, ऑन ए कंटिन्यूड बेसिस, इस पर्टिकुलर वेरिएंट से संबंधित केसेस की दूसरे देशों में भी नोट किया जा रहा है। और जैसे कि 27 को 5 नए देश, 28 नवंबर को 2 देश, 29 नवंबर को 4 और देश, इसी तरह से अगर 1 दिसंबर को देखें तो 9 और देशों में इस पर्टिकुलर वेरिएंट को नोट किया गया। इससे संबंध में हम बताना चाहेंगे कि अगर हम देखें नेक्स्ट, तो हम पाते हैं कि करीब 29 देशों में 373 केस इस ओमिक्रॉन वेरिएंट के अब तक नोट किए जा चुके हैं, और हमारे देश में इसकी ओवरऑल मॉनिटरिंग भी की जा रही है, जिसमें मुख्यतः सबसे अधिक केस साउथ अफ्रीका में है, उसके बाद अधिक केस बोत्सवाना में, नीदरलैंड में, यूनाइटेड किंगडम में, जर्मनी में, पोर्चुगल और घाना ऐसे देशों में नोट किए गए हैं। इसी से संबंध में हम आपसे बताना चाहेंगे कि इस पर्टिकुलर वेरिएंट के बारे में कुछ हद तक ये कहा जा रहा है, जबकि एविडेंस और आनी बाकी है, कि हो सकता है कि ये इंक्रीज्ड इन्फेक्टिविटी हो इसकी, और इसकी इंक्रीज ट्रांसमिसिबिलिटी हो। तो जो इसमें जो म्यूटेशन पाए गए हैं, उससे एक प्रेडिक्शन जो डॉक्टर एरिक उन्होंने की है, जो कि अमेरिकन साइंटिस्ट इन वाशिंगटन है और हार्वर्ड चैन स्कूल से है, पब्लिक हेल्थ से, तो उनकी एक प्रेडिक्शन, एक मॉडलिंग के हिसाब से उन्होंने इसके बारे में बताया कि हो सकता है कि 5 गुना अधिक इन्फेक्शियस हो। और जो ये वायरस होता है, जहां पर कि मुख्यतः स्पाइक प्रोटीन जिसको हम बोलते हैं, उसमें इसमें काफ़ी हद तक इवन डेल्टा वेरिएंट, जो कि लास्ट वेरिएंट दुनिया में एक अधिक संख्या में नोट किया गया और जो कि मुख्यतः प्रचलित हमारा वेरिएंट पूरे दुनिया में इस समय है, उससे भी अधिक स्पाइक लेवल पर इसकी 2 गुना से भी अधिक म्यूटेशन है। उसी एक मॉडलिंग के स्वरूप में उन्होंने जैसे कि दिखाया, हम आपके सामने प्रस्तुत करना चाहते हैं। तो उन्होंने बताया कि कैसे ये पर्टिकुलर वेरिएंट अपीयर करता है, कि हो सकता है कि ये चाहे बीटा वेरिएंट रहा हो, चाहे डेल्टा वेरिएंट रहा हो, उसको भी ये अधिक गति से आउटपेस कर सकता है। तो जैसे कि हम देखते हैं कि डे सिंस इमरजेंस, अगर इस ग्राफ में देखें तो मॉडलिंग के द्वारा उन्होंने एक प्रेडिक्शन की है, जिसको फर्दर एनालाइज करने की जरूरत है, जिसको फर्दर और समझने की जरूरत है। तो हम देखते हैं कि जैसे ये रेड लाइन के द्वारा B1.1.529 यह ओमिक्रॉन वेरिएंट है, इसमें बहुत अधिक गति से, अधिक स्पीड से केसेस ओवरऑल आने शुरू हो जाते हैं विजावी डेल्टा एंड बीटा। बट यह एक मॉडलिंग है, इसको और फर्दर समझने की जरूरत है, इसको और एविडेंस के द्वारा हमें इसको एनालाइज करने की जरूरत है। और इसी से संबंध में हम WHO के जो इनपुट्स हैं, इसकी ट्रांसमिसिबिलिटी और सीवियरिटी के बारे में भी आप सबके सामने प्रस्तुत करना चाहते हैं। WHO ने बताया है कि इसमें करीब 45 से 52 के करीब ओवरऑल म्यूटेशन नोट की गई हैं, जिसमें से करीब 26 से 32 म्यूटेशन जो हैं वह स्पाइक प्रोटीन से रिलेटेड हैं। और इसमें से कुछ ऐसी म्यूटेशन है जो अभी भी दुनिया में पाए गए जितने वेरिएंट ऑफ कंसर्न थे उनमें भी पाई गई हैं, अल्फा हो, बीटा हो, गामा हो या डेल्टा हो, तो कुछ वेरिएशंस उसमें भी कॉमन हैं। और WHO की जो हमारे को इन्फॉर्मेशन मिली है, उसके हिसाब से RT-PCR टेस्ट इसमें क्योंकि सीक्वेंस कंफर्मेशन में एक एड कर सकता है, इसको एक मार्कर के रूप में भी हम यूज कर सकते हैं, एंड इट कैन बी यूजफुल इन अर्ली प्रोबेबल डिटेक्शन ऑफ दिस पर्टिकुलर म्यूटेशन ऑल्सो। साथ ही उन्होंने कहा है कि चांसेस हैं कि यह अधिक ट्रांसमिसिबल हो, और इसकी बाइंडिंग एफिनिटी, जो हमारे सेल से बाइंडिंग एफिनिटी है, शायद कुछ अधिक हो, जिससे कि इसको सेल को अटैच होने में एक चांसेस इसके बढ़ जाते हैं। ट्रांसमिशन के बारे में उन्होंने बताया है कि यद्यपि अर्ली डेटा यह बताता है कि इसका ग्रोथ रेट अभी काफ़ी ज़्यादा है, लेकिन कितना ट्रांसमिसिबल है इसके लिए और एविडेंस की ज़रूरत है। यह काफ़ी अर्ली अंडरस्टैंडिंग है और इसको हमें एविडेंस के बेस पर फर्दर समझने की ज़रूरत है। डिजीज सीवियरिटी के बारे में भी उन्होंने बताया है कि रिपोर्ट अब तक आई है उसमें माइल्ड टू सीवियर केसेस पाए गए हैं, लेकिन जैसे कि कुछ रिपोर्ट्स में कहा गया है कि साउथ अफ्रीका में हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन बढ़ा है, तो उसमें उनका कहना यह है कि यह जरूरी नहीं है कि हॉस्पिटलाइजेशन ओमिक्रॉन की वजह से ही बढ़ा हो, यह भी हो सकता है कि अधिक संख्या में केसेस आने की वजह से भी अधिक संख्या में लोग हॉस्पिटल में जा रहे हों। तो इससे इंक्रीज सीवियरिटी ऑफ केसेस के बारे में अभी कोई क्लैरिटी नहीं है, फर्दर एविडेंस की जरूरत है। इसी के साथ ही WHO ने कुछ रिकमेंडेशंस भी दी हैं, जिसमें कि उन्होंने स्पेसिफिकली बताया है पब्लिक हेल्थ एंड सोशल मेजर्स, यानी कि उन्होंने बताया है कि चाहे वह यूज ऑफ मास्क हो, अपने हैंड हाइजीन प्रैक्टिसेस हो, फिजिकल डिस्टेंसिंग का मेंटेनेंस हो, हम हमेशा कहते रहे हैं कि इंडोर स्पेसेस में प्रॉपर वेंटिलेशन हो, हम क्राउडेड प्लेसेस को अवॉइड करें और हम अपने आप को वैक्सीनेट कराएं। तो WHO ने क्लियर इंडिकेशन दी है कि यह सारे टूल्स आज भी इस पर्टिकुलर वेरिएंट के लिए एप्लीकेबल हैं। तो हम आपके द्वारा सबसे अपील करना चाहेंगे कि जो मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट अंडरस्टैंडिंग जो इस वायरस के बारे में आज हम ले सकते हैं वह यह है कि हमारे जो पब्लिक हेल्थ के आज तक के करे हुए कार्य हैं वही कार्य हमें करते रहना है। साथ ही WHO ने यह भी कहा है कि जो हमारा PCR RT-PCR टेस्ट है वह ओमिक्रॉन इन्फेक्शन को डिटेक्ट कर सकता है और इसमें एक पर्टिकुलर एस जीन टारगेट फेलियर, जो कि सर और फर्दर एक्सप्लेन भी करेंगे, तो एस जीन टारगेट फेलियर नोट की जाती है। तो जो 3 जीन्स के संबंधित RT-PCR टेस्ट होते हैं उसके द्वारा एक प्रोबेबल अंडरस्टैंडिंग कि यह ओमिक्रॉन वायरस म्यूटेशन इस पर्टिकुलर केस में है उसको भी डिटेक्ट करने की संभावना ईजी हो जाती है। तो इसके द्वारा भी हम RT-PCR टेस्ट को भी यूज कर सकते हैं। यह भी एक चीज WHO ने हमें बताई है। साथ ही उन्होंने कहा है कि जो हमारे क्लिनिकल मैनेजमेंट प्रोटोकॉल हैं, जो हमारी एग्जिस्टिंग दवाइयां हैं, वह इस पर्टिकुलर वेरिएंट के लिए अभी दे रिमेन अनचेंज, वही मेथोडोलॉजी हमें यूज करनी है। वैक्सीन के बारे में उन्होंने बताया है कि अभी इम्पैक्ट ऑन वैक्सीन को और एविडेंस की जरूरत है, जिसके बेसिस पे समझने की जरूरत है कि उस पर क्या इम्पैक्ट पड़ेगा। और उन्होंने कहा है कि हो सकता है कि अगर ओमिक्रॉन से कोई ब्रेक थ्रू इन्फेक्शन होते भी हों तो भी हमारे यहाँ जैसे कि एंटीबॉडी रेस्पॉन्स के साथ साथ टी सेल रिलेटेड इम्यूनिटी है, वह इम्यूनिटी इसके लिए यूजफुल होगी। इसमें मुख्यतः जो हम आपसे रिक्वेस्ट करना चाहेंगे और आपके द्वारा सबको बताना चाहेंगे कि WHO ने एक बहुत मुख्य बात ये कही है कि वैक्सीन पे हमें ध्यान देना है और साथ ही वैक्सीन के अलावा भी, जैसे कि माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कई बार इस विषय में कहा है कि दवाई भी कढ़ाई भी, तो उसी तरीके से यूज ऑफ मास्क, फिजिकल डिस्टेंसिंग और हैंड एंड रेस्पिरेटरी हाइजीन भी हमारे लाइफ में उतना ही इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट प्ले करें वैक्सीनेशन के बाद भी। तो इस विषय में हम आपसे रिक्वेस्ट करना चाहेंगे कि वैक्सीन्स अलॉन्ग विद वैक्सीन्स ऑल अदर मेजर्स हैव टू बी कंटिन्यूड। साथ ही देश में जैसे ही हमें इस पर्टिकुलर ओमिक्रॉन वेरिएंट के बारे में खबर आई दुनिया से, तो हमने अपनी इंटरनेशनल ट्रैवल एडवाइजरी को थोड़ा और रेस्ट्रिक्ट किया और उसके बेसिस पर कार्य शुरू किया, जिसके बारे में मुख्यतः हम बताना चाहेंगे कि हमने दुनिया के सभी देशों को 2 भागों में डिवाइड किया। कंट्रीज जहां पर या तो अधिक केस आ रहे हैं या ओमिक्रॉन वेरिएंट पाया गया है, और रिमेनिंग अदर कंट्रीज। तो हमने यह डायरेक्शन इशू की है या एडवाइजरी इशू की है कि जो कंट्रीज एट रिस्क हैं वहां पर 72 घंटे से पहले वाले टेस्ट के अलावा भी अगर कोई यात्री वहां से आते हैं तो उनको कंपलसरी RT-PCR टेस्टिंग एयरपोर्ट पर करानी पड़ेगी, और अगर उनका रिजल्ट पॉजिटिव आता है तब क्लिनिकल मैनेजमेंट प्रोटोकॉल के द्वारा उनका इलाज किया जाएगा और उसके साथ ही उनका सैंपल जीनोमिक सीक्वेंसिंग के लिए भेजा जाएगा कि कहीं उसमें ओमिक्रॉन वेरिएंट तो नहीं है। इसके साथ ही अगर उनका टेस्ट नेगेटिव आता है तो हम उनसे रिक्वेस्ट करेंगे कि वह होम क्वारंटाइन में 7 दिन रहें और 7 दिन होम क्वारंटाइन में रहने के बाद 8वें दिन फिर से रीटेस्टिंग कराएं। इसी के साथ ही फिर अगर उनका वहां पर भी नेगेटिव आता है तो वायरस का इंक्यूबेशन पीरियड क्योंकि 14 दिन माना जाता है, तो हमने उनसे रिक्वेस्ट की है कि उसके बाद भी 7 दिन नेगेटिव होने के बाद भी, यानी कि पूरे 14 दिन के पीरियड के लिए वो सेल्फ मॉनिटरिंग की स्थिति में रहें। साथ ही वह देश